Hello and welcome to Home Media Minefield Presents Let's See What's Out There, an entertainment live stream focused on film and television. And in today's episode, if the title hasn't already given it away, we are going to be looking at the Saw franchise because, yes, it's approaching Halloween. Horror movies are back in the cinema. Did they ever leave? Well, the franchises are back. So we're going to have a conversation today in spoilerific detail about the entire Saw franchise, including the latest, the 10th film, Saw X or Sawx, or however you want to pronounce it. But we're going to be talking about Saw 10 as well in this. So buckle up. If you want to get involved in the chat, please do put comments down and I will see if I can include you on this. If it's your first time here watching this, then welcome. Really appreciate it. If you find this stream entertaining or informative in any way, then please consider giving us a like. One of those thumbs up always helps. And subscribing to the channel. And if you hit the bell icon, you'll get notified as and when new content drops. It can be a bit random sometimes, but essentially this channel, we look at film and television and related media. We cover movies, different franchises, different TV shows. We also talk very much about physical media, as the name Home Media Minefield suggests. We talk about everything from streaming, 4K, Blu-ray, DVD, the whole gamut of that sort of thing, and the technology surrounding it as well. My name's Keith Isles. I am an independent filmmaker and a lifelong enthusiast and fan of movies and televisions. I absolutely love this stuff. I love making them when I can. I, of course, love watching them and reading about them. And whenever I can, I love talking about them. But I'm not alone on this quest. I have guests joining me today from both sides of the Atlantic here to dissect this franchise, no pun intended. So first up from London, in fact, from Pinewood Studios, I have from Turtle Canyon Media. He is a filmmaker himself as well. Welcome to the show, Al Clayton Reed. Hey, Al.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good, man. I'm enjoying the spooky season, although it is unfathomably warm in the UK right now, as I'm sure you know.
It is.
So it doesn't feel like October yet, which is a shame. But yeah, I'm enjoying all these movies coming out. Looking forward to talking about these ones.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, it's BAFTA season as well at the moment, voting season. And our paths, so obviously, we do these streams from time to time, about various things, but we actually bumped into one another in person recently.
Yeah.
And it was really hard not to talk about the things we're going to discuss today, but we managed to resist and save it. So, cool. Well, joining us from the other side of the pond, I'm really pleased to welcome back to the podcast. He's been the live stream. He's been a guest before on many others. And what he does is he talks about timelines, movie timelines specifically. Now, I think the Saw franchise, if ever there's, a franchise or a movie series or collection where we can talk about specific timelines, it is indeed this film series. So I'm really pleased to welcome back to the I keep wanting to say podcast. Some people listen to this, but it's a live stream. I welcome back to the live stream. He is a filmmaker himself. He has his own channel, Movie Timelines, which is an amazing channel. And he has also written a book. So he's a published author. Welcome, Josh Spiegel. Oh, let's get a better frame.
Hey,
Sorry.
How's it going? Well, thanks for having me back. It's awesome.
No, it's always good. It's the dream team. So it's great to have you back, and I hope everything's going well with the book. Yeah.
Yeah, everything's been going really solid. Book wise, I'm working on a follow up right now. That I think I might go a different route with. Because I want to do a coffee table book. And I might be doing self-publishing for that.
Oh, fantastic!
So that's the works for the near future. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, brilliant.
Great.
Well, we'll
Exciting.
obviously, I will share all of your details and everything, in the show notes and at the end of this stream. You can plug and promote anything. But as I said, I encourage people to subscribe to the Movie Timelines channel. In fact, that's how I first found out about you, Josh, was watching your content, and I thought, oh wow, wouldn't you be a cool guest to have on? And you have been indeed. So
well, and I love being on with Al, because our opinions often contrast drastically. But it's always but it's cordial, so it's always kind of like a fun contrast.
Exactly. What I'm going to do is what I'll do as well is I'll put some links, and I'll put some links at the end and whatever to some of the other streams that we've done. So if people want to check those out, we've talked about the Halloween franchise, we've talked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Scream, Friday the 13th, to name just a few. So there's a lot of entertainment on there. But you are right that you and Al do tend to sometimes be on slightly different sides of the fence opinion wise. So I think what we really need is maybe a fourth person on this to sort of even out the thoughts. So I'm really pleased. I've got another guest tonight, again, joining us from that side of the pond. He too has his own YouTube channel where he looks at, well, quite a lot of films as well and franchises, and breaks them down and ranks them and things of that nature. He's often been a commentator within our chat when we've had him on, when we've done chats previously, but it's really nice to actually have him on the video and have him join us. So we've got your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete. Or we'll just call you Uncle Pete.
Yeah, just plain old Uncle Pete is fine. Appreciate you having me. Like I said, I've been part of the chat a bunch of times, and it's kind of cool to be part of this.
Yeah, well, thanks for reaching out. You messaged me and said that you'd recently, watched the entire movie series in preparation for X, and wanted to join. And I'm always pleased to have new guests on. So you're very welcome to join in this, and I think you're going to have the encyclopedic knowledge of this if I get lost in the timeline in any way.
For the last 10 weeks, I've covered all the Saw films on my channel. So
Right.
Fantastic. Well, as I usually start with these things, first of all, a couple of quick shout outs, better say this. So we've got Rob Dawn has sent some applause there, and Carlin Cook. Is that right? Carlin Cook. Josh is a triple treat. So there you go, Josh. You've got your
Triple
fan
threat.
club.
Triple threat.
Oh, threat. Sorry. There we go.
Although I do think of myself as a triple treat.
Treat, yeah.
There you go.
Triple threat because you got a knife.
I don't have a knife. I do have an axe, though.
Exactly. not that I'm dyslexic in any way and keep getting my mucking words fuddled up. But there you go. We will move on. But yes, welcome guys. Anyway, watching there in the chat, and feel free to pipe in whenever you want, and I will try my best to manage this and get to you, as I'm obviously doing all of that from here as well. So happy days. Well, I think I want to start where I always do with this, and it's just a quick sort of round robin with you all. Is the Saw franchise doesn't stretch back as far as some of the other franchises we've covered, some of the other movie series, which go back to, when we were kids, or in some cases before we were even born. In the case of this one, it's obviously a more contemporary. It's been going for nearly 20 years, 19 years, I think, currently. 10 movies in 19 years. What's your relationship been with it? How did you find them? Did you see them on the big screen? Did you discover them later? And what's your overall thoughts? Uncle Pete, as you're new to the channel, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I saw the original Saw when it came out, I think 2004, and I was lucky not to have the ending spoiled, and I was just like, that was probably one of the best horror movies I've seen in the 2000s, and as far as franchises go for the last 20 plus years since 2000, I think it's probably one of the best just in the last 20 years. Different when you get to the 90s and 80s, but probably a lot of inventive kills into it. A lot of them have a good story. I mean, the later ones we kind of drop, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But as far as main franchises go in the last 20 years, definitely top tier.
Excellent. Yeah, no, agreed. And you have an endorsement here as well about your knowledge, your memory when it comes to films. So thanks for that, Carlin.
Thanks, Carlin.
What about you, Al?
Yeah, similarly, I remember seeing it when it was first come out, and it was like, wow, this new kind of in the slasher mold, but it's a sort of reinventing that thing, and I think we had that thing in the first run of like the first 6 or 7 where it was every year you knew there was going to be another Saw, and it was just became like, oh, we know we're doing that, and I always really enjoyed them, and then after Saw 3D, Saw 7, whatever we're calling it now, I kind of forgot that they were a thing, and then only kind of when Spiral came out, I was like, "Oh yeah, those movies are great. Why? Let's do more of them." So I'm really pleased that there's a 10th and hopefully more.
Hopefully more. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. What about you then, Josh? I noticed. I watched your. I should I say I rewatched your episode on the Saw timeline, and at the time it was before Jigsaw, which was the 8th film. I think in the franchise. It was before that came out. So you really covered the 7 movies that sort of ran every year consecutively, and got to that point. I don't know whether you're planning an update, but yeah, what's your history with it like?
It's kind of weird. I have a very complicated relationship with this series because I saw the first 2 like when they came out, and I just said these aren't for me. And I skipped. I didn't watch any of the rest of them at all. And it wasn't until I did that video, the timeline of the Saw movies, way back when. That was the first time that I had watched anything past 2. And watching them for a timeline video, I was just like, okay, I don't think I like these. But I do find them very fascinating. Like, I do think that the way that they structured themselves and the whole sort of flashbacks within timelines being broken, and this takes place here and this takes place here. They came up with a really interesting concept and a way of telling stories. I guess I just never really loved the stories that they were applying that to, and I still don't think they're great movies. But I really respect like the effort that they took into putting that aspect, that world building together. It fell apart by the ending. The whole timeline aspect and the whole really tight continuity falls apart. It starts to fall apart in 7, and then Jigsaw falls apart even worse. Spiral does a decent job of maintaining it a bit, and then Saw X actually seems to fit in there fine. But
cool.
But they're interesting. I mean, it's like when they come out, I want to watch them. I know that I'm never going to be like, that was great, but I know that I'm always going to be like, oh yeah, that was kind of cool how it did that.
Yeah. No, I was kind of the same. I saw all of them in the cinema each year that they were released. The first one blew me away just because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't see the twist coming. You know, and I was really kind of like, wow, this is really cool. And it got to a thing where, you know, each year, obviously when we got to the 3rd one, and, you know, we said we're going to spoil the hell out of this, but essentially Jigsaw dies in the 3rd one. And, you know, John Kramer / Jigsaw has his autopsy at the beginning of the 4th one. And it's like, well, you know, how are they going to keep this going? And I did think the way they kept it going was quite inventive, and I did like the world building that they made. You know, their own sort of cinematic universe, to coin the term that everybody loves nowadays. But you know, the universe they created, the continuity they created, the style and look, which obviously I've tried to emulate today with the lighting, that they did in the whole franchise. And I have to say, I know a lot of people dismiss these, you know, that terminology of torture porn was batted around a lot. And I have to say, okay, I guess as the series progressed, and certainly when we're talking about Spiral, um, I can see where people would say that. But as far as the sort of ethos of the original film and certainly the first few, I don't necessarily agree that it's a torture porn in the same way as something like Hostel is regarded as that. And the reason I say that is because what we'll dig into, I'm sure, but of the Jigsaw character, of the John Kramer played by Tobin Bell. But I don't know. Does anyone disagree with that statement that I've made? Do you think
I agree, but just to piggyback on that, I appreciate them trying to tie all the movies together for a franchise. Because you go look at Halloween, Freddy, Leatherface, all those big franchises, a lot of them just don't tie in together, and the writers are like, eh. But I do appreciate the effort they made in all the films to tie it to one central idea with John Kramer, instead of just going off, oh, it's a new guy this time. Oh, it's a new guy, but it's still kind of tying into John Kramer, even though he's been dead. So even though sometimes the execution failed, I appreciate the effort to tie them all in together.
Yeah, I agree. I think like having that, I think because like you said, Pete, that it's kind of a new franchise, and I think that anything that's come out in the age of like home video and then into the internet, you can't not pay attention to that stuff. I often think some of these franchises that are older get a bad rep now because it's like, well, they came out in movie theaters and people just didn't ever expect that they'd be agonized over them in the way they are now.
Whereas and you never knew movies were coming out because it was like you have to go to the movie to see a trailer. Now, because the internet, we know after this movie gets released, oh, there's a sequel. Normally, you wouldn't know till months later, so you have time to forget. Oh, really? So you forget about those movies because it's been so long you even heard about them.
Yeah. But I think also, Keith, with what you were saying, like and Josh as well, actually, I really appreciate in these films, and by no means is it my favorite like horror franchise or anything, but I love how consistent they at least try to be. They don't always hit the mark, but it feels like even though there's different directors and stuff, any of these could be on almost to a fault because you can watch them and go, which one is this again? There is not like a unique style to each one. There is a style to the franchise that somehow they sort of introduced in the first one, and that's managed to stay the course. Often it's like there's the first one and then they establish a style over the second or third. But the fact that that stuff's always kind of been in there and all the kind of motifs that you get throughout them, it just feels like, oh yeah, this always feels like it hangs together, even if not all of them are great to watch,
Yeah, it feels like a believable world, even though obviously some of the stuff that happens in it is absolutely ludicrous, but there's something about it that you like you said, because of some of the iconography and the look and feel, and also the the things like the micro cassettes and the videos and Billy the puppet and all of that sort of thing. It all feels kind of believable in inverted commas.
Well, it feels like they've really built a world, and I think it's quite an achievement in that so many franchises you have like one thing, whether it's like Michael Myers in a mask and a boiler suit, and that's the one thing. The fact that they have all of that stuff that you just mentioned, the videotape, the micro cassette, Billy the puppet, they're in all of them. And like since the first one, that's all established, and they managed to keep bringing that back just in the right amounts. Even in the newest one, it's like, oh yeah, there's just a little bit of each one of those things, and it's like that's the fact that they all hang together and it doesn't feel overwhelming in terms of stuff to me is like, good job.
And Josh, I think you pointed out in your video, which I thought was quite amusing and interesting. Obviously, another one of the sort of icons of this franchise is, of course, the pig mask. And pigs in general really is kind of part of it. But when they sort of, in the later films, they were sort of trying to fill out the backstory and set it in certain years leading up to the events. I think you mentioned that the one thing they got wrong was it wasn't the year of the pig, it was the year of the monkey or something. Is that right?
Yeah. It's just, I mean, the issue that they had a lot of times is that they were trying to make this sort of nebulous, like it could be any city and any time, but they did throw out a lot of dates. Like in the earlier movies, they threw out a lot of dates, and they did a good job on being like, okay, well, it's always 2004. But the problem is then they started throwing in things that were not like of that time era, and it's just like, I mean, I think the most egregious one was the use of flat screen TVs and Jigsaw, which was kind of like, wait, what? Hey, no, not in 2004. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
They might have been around, but they would have been like 50 grand each. There's no,
Yes.
Such a waste of money when you got to build traps.
Yeah. Well, we found in this one he spent all that money, didn't he?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Carlin Cook has put a comment here. The biggest issue with the films are that because they're all tied so closely to the source material, people get bored because they feel too similar.
Wait, what do you mean by source material?
I guess they mean the first film, right?
Oh, okay.
So I don't disagree with that, but I think again, like the way we all found them, as in like, sorry, not you, Josh, actually, but like the way that we talked about how we went once a year to each one, that kind of worked in its favor. Then I think now if you, like I just did, spend 10 days watching one a day, you do get a bit like, oh, which one am I in now? Like,
I think if Carl's getting, they kind of become like rinse, wash, and repeat. It's like it is the whole rinse, wash, repeat. Same, okay, that same. You missing all the same beats.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because one of the things you were saying earlier about them having a consistent style through all the films, I actually think that there's a point in time where that actually hurts the movies because they all start to look the same, feel the same, have the same. Like there's a point where, I'm sitting down, and even in prepping for this video, and I'm thinking like, okay, well, let me just like, and I'm like, okay, which one was that?
Yeah.
What one was that? I don't know which. what did that storyline happen?
Yeah.
And it's just they tended to blend, and I really feel like they didn't want to take any chances with really any of them, which kind of hurt it, and which kind of hurt the series in the ending because they all look the same. They all sound like the audio kind of feels the same. The only one I think that started to get a little bit different was the 3D one, Saw 3D 7.
Yeah.
Took on a more like a brighter, shinier palette to it. And it stands out for having that like glossier look.
Yeah,
which was possible.
The reason for that is so annoying, though.
Yeah. Is it to serve the 3D? Yeah.
Yeah, it's because when you put polarizing glasses on, you lose about 2 stops of exposure. So it has everything. But the annoying thing now is they could have just gone back for the 2D release and fixed that. Whereas actually what we get is pink blood and just like a washed out. It's so difficult to watch that because you're like, all of the injuries. I mean, that's the thing about the series is if you want to see gory injuries, let's face it, a lot of us do. It's good for that. But then when you get to the 3D one, you're like, well, that's pink. And it so takes you out of it. But.
Yeah.
And I don't like when they write a movie. I don't know what we'll get to when we get to that movie, but when they write a movie kills specific to be shot in 3D, I think you're kind of losing something. Like, okay, you can like, oh, okay, that was a 3D kill right there. I mean,
yeah, definitely.
No, definitely, and I mean, one of the things actually these films, for film fans and filmmakers and whatever, the physical media releases of these are actually very good because they have a lot of bonus content, commentaries and making of documentaries and the short film upon which it was all based. All of those sort of things tend to be extras if you buy it on DVD or Blu-ray. But of course, because it's one of those franchises that keeps growing, every time you think you've bought the ultimate collection, oh darn, they've released another one, we're gonna have to rebuy it all again. I think the last one I got was when Jigsaw came out. I got that set, but obviously
stressful.
then there's been Spiral and X. Well, let's just look at by the way, I got this. You might not agree with this slide completely. I was trying to find a thing with all the posters and all the films on, and I found this on Pinterest. But it's interesting, I think, that they've put it down as two continuities, because personally, I didn't look at Saw X as a, if you like, sequel reboot type thing, like they've done with Halloween and all that. I looked at it simply as an interquel, a film that fits between 1 and 2. And to me, it seemed to fit quite seamless. But this almost is sort of implying it's a new continuity. I just wondered if you guys got any thoughts on that.
Where's that from?
I just got it from Pinterest. I got home and I was trying to put the slides together in a bit of a hurry. So I just Googled, the thing, and this came up. And the reason I took a snapshot of it for this is I thought it was rather interesting that it's been framed like that, because
I've never heard anybody talk about it being framed like that. I've only heard, it takes place between parts 1 and 2. Okay,
exactly.
That was it.
But that person just doesn't know. I mean, like, because not only does the movie go out of its way to kind of like let you know that like it's like that it's in the continuity and follows the continuity, but like every piece of promotional press that they had beforehand like explained, it takes place in the past, it's between 1 and 2, like everything said that. So I don't know where that person got it, but I mean, maybe it's just like a fan.
And this one even ties into future ones, because when John talks to Detective on the phone, it's Hoffman, so it even ties into the future ones.
Yeah. In fact, something I did. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't do the exhaustive watch, although I kind of wanted to. I just didn't have time with work and everything. But that Pete and Al did. But I did watch, before I went and saw X. I watched the first Saw, and then once I'd watched it, I came back immediately and watched Saw 2, just because I wanted to see, if the continuity worked and if it made sense. And I have to say, I thought it did. I mean, I kind of like the fact that they've taken the sort of Breaking Bad franchise approach, that rather than trying to do weird digital de-aging or anything like that, they've just kind of lent into the fact, you know what, that they're nearly 20 years older than they should be, but hey, we'll buy into it, sort of thing.
I think they get away with it. Like, I mean, especially with John Kramer, because he's dying of cancer in all of them, so it sort of makes sense that he's not going to look great. Like, he's going to look older.
And Shawnee Smith still looks fantastic. So.
The wig could have been just more pleasing, but it worked.
But no, I did like the fact, because obviously we got so many films now trying to do the sort of, digital de-aging and all of this sort of stuff. Unless they throw absolute mega bucks at it, it doesn't usually look great. But as I said, Breaking Bad and its prequels and
even when they do throw mega bucks on it, you still get Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So let's
or what, X3 The Last Stand with Patrick Stewart.
Yeah. Well, that was following because they tried to do it with the whole Red Dragon thing, didn't they? Making Hopkins, who was 12 years older, but the film was supposed to take place nearly a decade before or something, and it was like, mind-bending stuff. But
can we go back to Saw 1 though? Can we start at the beginning with Saw?
We can. In fact, I've got a slide ready to prompt it. Yeah. Sorry. Let's go back to the beginning. Yeah.
Because I will say, because I figured you want some spice. I figure you want some spice on the stream.
And get spicy.
The spiciest thing that I have is because it drives me bananas every time. Because I think the first Saw is the best of the bunch, and it's a good solid flick. And it is like, you get into the whole torture porn aspect of things, and I think the original Saw is one of the least of that, like, whole, we're just showing you this big long scene of a person in pain. so it doesn't really fall into that. I will say that the thing that everyone seems to love about this movie, the twist, I think is the dopiest, dumbest thing, and completely ruins and takes me out of the movie. Because here's the thing: you're all gonna say how much you love the twist and the fact that that the dead body in the middle of the room is actually John Kramer, and he just gets up, and how crazy is that? The entire thing falls apart the second you say, "But why? What possible reason was there for him to be in that room?" It served zero purpose. There was zero need for him to do that. And the fact that he was drugged and unconscious meant that he personally didn't get anything out of it either. So literally, the only reason that twist is in the movie is for you, the audience, because it doesn't serve the story at all. So it only exists to be a twist. And I, as a writer, hate that because the whole thing just hinges upon, wouldn't it be cool if then the body got up? Well, why? Well, because he's the killer, right? But why would he be in there? He wants to be close to the action. But why wasn't he moved? Well, why wouldn't he move? Why wouldn't he realize that he's alive? He's drugged. Oh, yeah. I guess if he's drugged, then why would he want to? I thought he wanted to be close to the action. If he's drugged, then he's not close to the action. He's unconscious. It doesn't make none of it makes any sense. The second, you think about any of the why of what reason he would want to be there. If he served an integral part of it, if he was he had to be in the room to activate this at a specific time, I get it. But he didn't. It's just, the twist is just there to be a twist, and it's just to make the audience go, "Whoa, I can't believe it." And it worked. I mean, obviously it worked because that's what everybody talks about when they talk about Saw. So it worked. But the second you think about it in terms of the story that they presented, it completely falls apart in my eyes.
Yeah.
This is going to be that one where me and Josh agree.
Oh, wow.
Yay!
Yeah, I can't argue that. That's
yeah.
It's I completely agree. I've always kind of thought that it's cool, but it doesn't really make any sense. And I think when the franchise gets going, the twists they make a lot more sense. The kind of the ending when the theme tune comes in, that moment I always just think is great. From this point on, actually they get better at it. And this one, and again, it also, to go further on it, it does, to me, it always feels like, why is Zepp part of this in any way? Mm-hmm. And the only real reason is to pretend to the audience that he's the bad guy. That's the only real reason, because
he was just the orderly.
Yeah.
He didn't do anything that would deserve punishment.
Yeah.
He hadn't joined Lost yet. That's why.
That's it. But I mean, when you think about if you take this as part of what John Kramer does, Zepp makes no sense even to the way he does things, because that never happens again. They don't have this I'm going to frame some guy sort of. Again, that feels totally like that's for the audience. And actually, that's why. I don't even know
if they had the sequels written when they had Saw in production. Did they have Saw 2 written to know, hey, we want to continue on with said story?
No, I'd be very surprised. Yeah. Because also, Saw 2 to me, I know we'll come on to it, but Saw 2 actually feels like what often doesn't happen is it feels like a sequel. It is quite different. Kind of what Josh says. It Saw 2 sticks with the prolonged periods of people in pain, which that becomes kind of the formula for the franchise. So Saw 2 does feel like a world expansion of a sequel, whereas I think if it was already in the works, it would have felt a bit closer to how the original works out. But
yeah, I mean, I
liked about the fact that, because it's hard to pull off, is when a lot of movies just two people in one room with flashbacks. I think Lee Winnell and Carrie Ells did a great job at carrying just being in one room. I had to appreciate that. And like you said, they didn't show a lot of gore when he was cutting his foot off. But when you see his reaction and Lee Winnell's reaction, that's one of my favorite parts of the movie, that crescendo of an ending, you know, even before John gets up, just the look on his face and everything. I think that was executed very well, even before John gets up.
Yeah.
That is something that Saw does really well. I'm sorry.
That's right.
I'm sorry, Kate. But it's funny because I saw a thread on Reddit about 2 weeks ago, and it was like, hey, tell me some great movies that take place in a single room. And, you know, there was a lot of familiar comments like Cube and things like that, where I'll talk about movies that take place in one location. But one of the most popular comments was Saw. And then, like, it doesn't take place in one room. There's like 7 or 8 locations. They're at the hospital. They're at the other. They're at Jigsaw's trap. They're at the doc's house. There are all these other locations. Like, it doesn't all take place in one room. But the movie does a good job of really making it feel like you're just there the whole time. And I do think that it has that going in its favor. That, like, it does convince you that you're in one location. And since all of the other things are mostly flashbacks and stuff like that, you feel like you're just in that one room the whole time.
Yeah.
Can I be spicy now?
Yeah. Go for it.
I don't think that I can never say Carrioles. I don't think he's very good at all. I find, like, ever since the first time I saw that film, I was like, that guy ruined this movie.
Roberts.
Yeah, he's great in like spoofs, but I do not buy for a second that guy is in a serious situation. It is so like huge theatrical all the time. I just can't. I've never been able to stand him in it, and every time I've gone back to it and gone, oh, maybe he's not so bad, and then by the end of it, I'm like, no, he's just bad in it. I can't. And he's in it. You know, you need to be with him to love that.
I don't think that's that big. Oddly enough, I don't think that's that big of a controversial statement, because I think that, like, his acting and also Danny Glover's, I mean, both of them just feel like they're like, what am I in? Saw? Okay, whatever. What's the line? Stop right there. Stop right there.
Danny Glover was wasted. That was especially that, and to have him get killed the way he got killed, I was so frustrated. I was like, what? You just it was a waste to why put him in that role?
Yeah, probably because they couldn't afford him for many days.
I was going to say,
he was the big name, wasn't he? In part 4, I think it would have went better because he would have had more to do.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
No, he was the big name for them. I mean, when obviously we've got James Wan and Lee Whannell there on the screen, but when they made the short film about the bear trap mask, as a sort of proof of concept, to sort of sell it and do this. But when they made this film, I mean, they were just making it as a standalone film, right? I mean, they weren't necessarily making it with the idea of it being a series, right? At that point, it was just a standalone film with as you've rightly pointed out, a bit of a gimmicky twist at the end, right? But I don't think they intended for it to balloon. I mean, obviously, of course, they're happy it did financially, I'm sure, but
it doesn't feel like it was written
not
that
involved,
way.
have they? Apart from taking a producer credit, I don't think they've been creatively involved in the sequels, right?
No, they don't. They haven't written any of them. They don't. Well, I guess Lee appears occasionally, but yeah. No. Yeah. But apparently, I did read recently from James Wan on the release of Saw 10 that he was like, "We love it so much. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Like, we're so proud of what we created, and good for them carrying it on." You know, they haven't gone down the John Carpenter route of going, I hate those fucking movies.
Well, you've got to think, like, I think any writer making anything horror or action or hell, even comedy at this particular point, anybody that is in the industry and you've got a gig writing a movie, I think that everyone is probably at some point considering that there's going to be a sequel, and what's the sequel going to be? Like, even though it may not be at the forefront of your head, and you're not like, okay, I'm writing this as the first part of a trilogy. Like, you're writing something going like, if I had to do a follow-up, I would do this. Like, I mean, like I did it. I mean, when I did the last Amityville movie, I'm just like, well, if I were going to do a second part of this, I'd probably do something like this. Like, you're always thinking of like what it could be if it goes big. And let's face it, you're filming a Saw. and I don't think that they were ever expecting it to be what it turned out to be. But you got to figure that they were hoping that it would be successful. And if you're hoping it's successful, you're thinking about what it could be next, like what the next part could be.
Yeah.
But I mean, even the title of it implies that it was sort of a standalone movie with the fact that it's got the double meaning in that first film, hasn't it? You know, it's kind of a. But Carlin Cook's made a comment here. In all fairness, the audience desire for things to be realistic in movies wasn't as strong back then, so they probably assumed people would look past that. I think that's with regards to the twist ending that we were talking about.
Is it strong now? I mean, I just watched the John Wick movies. Does anybody?
I think it goes in waves, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
it really does.
I feel like the audience's desire of things being realistic in movies is never strong. I feel like we all like to nitpick things, and we like to nitpick things back then as well too. But it wasn't as like, you know, there wasn't as big of an internet for us to like broadcast it and like make videos about all of the things. But you know, there was still. I mean, I still like. I remember even like watching Die Hard and being like, "Oh, come on, that the gun in the ventilation shaft would not hold his weight. That's silly." Like, so, yeah, I feel like it's always there, but like, you know, I don't know if it ever really.
Yeah, and I think with horror stuff as well is that I think people want like to go right up to the line of what feels truly realistic, but they don't really want to cross it, because then it's just like that is horrible and not entertaining anymore. Because like the first time I saw 10, I saw it a couple of times. First time I saw it with a friend, and he'd only seen like I think 1 and 2 back, you know, when they came out. And he was like, with these movies, I'm always annoyed because, like, I just think everyone who's trying to, like, cut their own legs off and stuff would have passed out. They would have thrown up on each other. It would have been, it's just not realistic. And I was like, I just don't think really audiences want it to be that real. They want to go like 98%, but not go all the way. Because if it's all the way, it's like, oh, this is truly quite disturbing. You know, we want SWOT to be kind of fun, you know, right?
I find movies more scary when it's 100% based in reality, because that makes me think, what if this happened to me? That terrifies me more than ghouls, goblins, monsters, and demons and stuff, because in the back of my mind, okay, yeah, jump scare, but I know that really can't happen. But like when I watch a horror movie, I see somebody getting killed, I put myself in the victim's position. That tells me how good that kill is. How bad would it be to die said way? And so when it's 100% based in reality, that scares me even more than, you know, when you have that suspension of disbelief or something supernatural or whatnot. Because right now I'm watching The House is October Built every day in October. So I don't know why, I just figured it'd be fun. But, you know, it's a documentary about people who go see haunted houses, and it's an extreme haunt. But there's one part where it's almost unexplainable, and it totally takes me out of the movie, because I was like, it's almost supernatural. And for me, that takes me out of it, because I prefer it to be 100% based in reality.
Yeah.
No, I get it. Well, as we move through this, do we want to talk about it in film release order or in continuity order?
I think do release. I think
release order makes more sense.
Right? All right. Yeah. So, I mean, anything you want to add about that original movie, apart from, you know, we generally like it. The twist is doesn't really hold water. But
I think the score makes it. The score at the end really the score was this big part of the ending of that movie. And throughout the movie, you realize, like, you hear that sound, Saw. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. That is, like, to me, that score, that Hello Zepp, that cue is like almost as big a hero as John Kramer for every single one. Like, you know, again, it's formulaic, but it's like, I know it's coming, and that's when we're going to find out what's really going on. And every time it comes in, it's like, great, love it. I'm in for it, man.
Obviously, Charlie Clouser being the composer across all of these films in the series. Actually, that Hello Zepp, I made a film called Driven Insane, and there was like a cue thing at the end, and for ages that was the temp track until Neil Myers, who was my composer, did a sort of his version of it, but I was very married to it because I wanted that same feeling. It was totally inspired by you know, the Saw movies. So yeah, very, very influential. And that, you're right, that music is, I mean, that's one thing that has been standard across all of them, because they even bring it into Spiral, don't they? In its own way. But yeah, so
I always think it's like the sonic equivalent of a character, their eyes widening as they realize what's going on for 4 minutes. And that is like, that's how it feels when that comes on. You're like, oh, but it's like in extreme slow motion, which often the characters are doing as well in that point. And it's like, wow, you've actually found the right musical composition to make that feeling, which is just amazing. Like you can't sort of repeat that. It's amazing.
No, I agree. It's really good. So cool. So what about Saw 2 then? What do we think about that one? That's the only one, apart from the new film and the original. Saw 2 is the only one I've watched like really recently. But how do you think that holds up? How do you feel about that?
I will say the needle pit still gives me the heebie-jeebies. that needle pit, it just, and because especially when you learn it wasn't supposed to be Amanda, it was supposed to be the other guy. So it's just like, and he just tosses her in. So you're angry at him for tossing Amanda in. And right now we don't know Amanda is part of it. You know, we think, oh shit, she's stuck in it again. And then you realize she was part of it. So she had to go through that while she was a protege. And that whole part just still gives me the heebie-jeebies because of the needles.
Do you ever wonder why? Because I'm exactly the same, and I hate needles and injections and all that stuff, and so like obviously it plays on that. It's pretty common fear, but like so many people remember that as one of the worst traps in the whole series. But when you think about it, it's like it's probably the least painful if you're in that position of a lot of these traps. But for some reason, it's just like, I can't.
I think it's maybe it's like they're supposed to be dirty needles and whatnot. They're not like sterile needles, so it plays with your mind like, oh god, what am I being injected with?
It's very effective.
It's very horrible. Yeah.
About Saw 2?
Go on,
I mean,
spice it up.
Saw 2 is honestly, it was a decent follow-up. I think Saw is fine. Like, I mean, Saw 2 is fine. Like, it's not. I don't think it's great, and I think that the biggest thing that hinders it is something that hinders quite a bit of the Saw movies. And when we get to X, I'll definitely talk about it. One of the biggest problem is that there's really no one to root for. They give you kind of a house full of assholes, and then they're like, okay, well, then they give you John Kramer. And then they give you Donnie Wahlberg, and you're like, okay, well, all right, he's the cop. But then they make him a jerk. So it's kind of like, okay, I hate everybody. The kid's fine. The kid was kind of jerky when they introduced him, but he's a kid. Okay, this Amanda girl seems pretty nice. Oh, maybe not. Okay, who am I supposed to like here? Who am I supposed to be rooting for? And that kind of the issue is that there's no one really to cheer on. And yeah, I mean, it's when the coincidences of like John Kramer has superpowers in that he knows exactly how things, like, what were the odds that the guy was going to have his eye right up to that peephole? What were the odds of that? Like, how many people do that when they're opening up a door? I'm going to open up this door, but let me do this while I'm doing it. Like it just.
I disagree with that. I think if you're in a door, that's the only way to see out of the door, and it's a peephole, you look through it to make sure there's not something dangerous on the other side, right?
But do you look through it at the exact moment that you're opening the door, or you do it before you open the door and you go, there's nothing out there. Okay, open up the door. Like it just seemed weird that he was like, okay, I'm going to put my eye right up to it and do the latch at the same time. Like, it just seems like such an awkward and like unusual thing to do. Like that, like, okay, it worked out in his favor that somebody did have their eye up the second that they did that. But like, people don't do that too frequently. Like, yes, people do look out the door, but they don't do it while they're opening the door. It just seemed a little bit like of a weird thing.
But how many nerve gas houses have you been in?
Well, I mean, granted, only 2.
I will say a lot of Jigsaw's traps do rely, because I rated every single kill, so I think a lot of them do depend on coincidence.
Yeah,
like it's like, why? Oh, because the writer said so. You kind of like, otherwise a lot of stuff wouldn't have happened. Like how would a lot of the kills take, and what Josh said, like there's no one to root for. I'd argue, with the exception of maybe Logan in Jigsaw, there really aren't. There's no main character really to root for.
Right.
Because really, almost everybody is unlikable.
Well, I think that is pretty consistent across the series, and actually, there was, if you think back to a lot of the stuff that was coming out, certainly in horror at that time, like it was a pretty depressive time with like the news and the culture in general, and I think those movies really.
Things are a lot cheerier now.
Hey, there's a lot of movies like it now as well, where there's just like everyone's a bad guy, and you kind of, it's a very, and it was the same in like 70s movies. It was like this is all kind of a downer, and we're just going to present you with that. And actually, I think that is kind of an interesting thing of the time and of different periods in film history, when you're like, there is no one in there. And what it does to me, especially in Saw 10, and I know we'll come on to that, is like,
I was going to say, we'll talk about
more than any of them, it makes you go, are we on the killer's side then? And that's kind of a bold move to go like, I know that films are meant to be about the heroes, but guess what? This is going to be about this guy, and just see where your morals work, you know.
Yeah, I want to talk about John Kramer, Jigsaw, Tobin Bell and all that, but we will save that until we get to X to dig into, I think. But the 50-foot nerd has said Saw 2 has the dumbest decision when that one girl puts both hands in that box with razor flaps.
She got one hand in the coffin.
Oh, he's gone. Hold on. He goes on to add, sorry, it would have made more sense if the doorknob blew up as he turned it.
That would make more sense.
Instead of the
gun. The random gun outside.
Yeah. No, exactly.
I think in terms of the dumb woman, I've always felt with that one, maybe I'm giving it too much benefit of the doubt, but like, by that point, when she puts them in, they're all like out of their heads on the nerve gas, and no one's doing anything that makes any sense anyway. So within that realm, it's like, they're all just doing mad shit now. That's the way it is.
Yes,
but it is dumb.
Yeah, and what about she didn't even listen to the tape? She just and threw it to the side, so she never read it or she knew. So she just stick one hand and then the other. So she never even read the tape or nothing.
That trap as well, that's close to the needle pit for me. Like, there's something about wrists that make me like really, it's just the skin's too thin, and you just when she's like cutting through, don't like that.
No, agreed. What about? I mean, again, the twist at the end of this one, is it? Does it work better than the first film? Does it hold up? Does it make more sense?
Step down.
See, I disagree, because I feel like number one, you've got a double twist. You've got Amanda being on the side of Jigsaw, which I think does make sense in terms of the way they've written it and everything like that, and like it does actually make sense to the storyline. And having her be in the house, it does make sense because she's guiding things and she was ensuring that things happened properly. As opposed to John being there in the first one and unconscious. Like if Amanda was in the house but unconscious, then it wouldn't make any sense. But she was there for a reason. She was there to be the eyes, and if things went a different direction, to steer them back in the direction that they needed it to go. So that made sense. And then for everything to have happened before, and for the kid to be in the safe, and for the detective, like that was a very good plot-oriented thing, because it was a test of the detective's patience. So it had a script reason for that twist. And I thought that in terms of like was it as big of a surprise as part one? Not really. But did it make more sense to the logic of the script that came before it? Absolutely. Absolutely.
There are much worse twists, and we'll get to there. There are twists that are just garbage.
Yeah, 7, for example. But This is mad. I'm going to totally agree with Josh again. What are we doing?
Wow,
But, what's happening? But yeah, I always thought that was a great twist, and I love how this is the one where they sort of introduce that a lot of what happens with Jigsaw is puns and wordplay, which I love, puns and wordplay. So when he says you'll find your son in a safe and secure place, it's like a little wink of like in a safe, and then there's so many more of those. Like I think it's in, I don't know which one, 3 or 4, when he's like the numbers are in the back of your mind, or no, it's in 2, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's again that introduction to the back of your mind thing is like, and that introduction of if you really listen to the words I'm saying, you'll get out of it is like that new layer that they introduce in 2 and carries on. I love all that stuff. So,
yeah, in fact, 50-foot nerd comments on that as well, saying Shawnee Smith has some of the best wide-eyed moments in that flick. For example, when Xavier is cutting his own neck, which is that bit, isn't it? Yeah. No, she's good. She's good in these films. It's good that it's good to see her back, but we'll get there. Yeah. Okay, so Saw, this is where I haven't done my own rewatches, so forgive me if I'm patchy on the next ones. But Saw 3, I am correct. That is the one where John Kramer dies, right?
Yeah. No.
Well, I mean, but
yes, you're right. I'm confusing them. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You are correct. Yes.
I thought you were gonna have some clever reason why it isn't really, but I was like,
no, I was confusing. I flip flopped the 3rd and 4th movie in my brain.
Yeah,
it's because they're simultaneous.
And actually, I was incorrect. Looking at the credits here, Lee Winnell did actually, and James Wan did actually do the story for Saw 3. In fact, Lee Winnell did the screenplay, and James Wan and Lee Winnell did story by, according to the source online. Anyway, let me see if IMDb, which is always correct, obviously.
I think for studio stuff like this, it usually is.
Yeah,
they soon correct it if it's not.
Well, Saw 3 is unusual because, especially in terms of the franchise in general, because it's the first time where like the person that's kind of in the trap situation is kind of a victim, instead of being like, okay, well, you're a terrible person, so I'm putting you through these traps. But it actually flip-flopped it and was just like, okay, well, this is your chance to get revenge on these people in a way. Because the guy, Jeff, in that movie wasn't really like guilty of that much. Like Jigsaw wasn't like, you're a terrible person, and like he himself isn't really subjected to most of the really horrible things, but it's more his chances to kind of help people out, or just like, because he could have just walked through that entire thing without, just let everybody die and been like, I'm just gonna stand back and I'm gonna suffer no consequences and just let you go. So it was interesting in that aspect of creating a different sort of scenario, instead of just like, yeah, you're bad people, so this is like sort of your punishment.
I think I saw recently someone had done a blog on like the most ridiculous reasons why Jigsaw targets people, and I think Jeff was like number 1, because it's like he's sad about his son being killed and no one did anything about it. But there's loads of them, like, especially in this day and age, is like, well, Amanda's a drug addict, like, well, I think we should have a bit more compassion. And there's a few people that are just like, she's not in a happy marriage like with his wife, and it's like, right, she might die then, because it's some of them are pretty like the boundaries are like, you're not being 100% happy with everything in your life all the time. I'm mad at you because I've got cancer, therefore you're probably going to die. It's like, and Jeff's both of those two are definitely one of those.
Well, let's face it, the notion that like that John is like sort of this nobly kind of dude that has this whole, I don't actually kill people, I just let them make their own decisions, like that's just like, he's a psychopath. He's a crazy person with a love of killing, and has created this little fantasy in his head to kind of justify it. But there's nothing noble or like sensible or like justified in anything he's doing.
But that I think is why it is so interesting as a concept, because it's sort of asking you to come to that conclusion, and like hopefully most people do. But I knew a guy back when these were like the first 2 or 3 were out, and he was pretty much like on Jigsaw's side quite seriously. Not going to mention who it was, doesn't matter. But like he was like, I think he's got some good ideas, that guy. Right. First of all, it's a movie. To be fair, this guy also believes wholeheartedly in the Force and that Star Wars is in some way a documentary. So
it's not.
This guy's off the radar. But yeah, he's genuinely like, yeah, that guy. He's like, I wouldn't do it, but I can see where he's coming from. And you go, no.
See, now with 3, I think like 50 for Nerd said, if you got Jeff. It's got one of the most frustrating characters in the entire franchise, but I love the ending with Amanda's performance. She finds the letter. She's upset. She feels like she's losing John. It's like my second favorite in the franchise when I ranked it, because there's just so much emotion at the end. That twist, it's one of my favorite twists. I think it's a better twist than part 1.
Yeah.
With Lynn being Jeff's wife and it all being interconnected. And it tied in so well. And it was Shawnee Smith's performance when she finds the letter and John is telling her, no, you got to let these people live. It's such a great ending. It's one of my favorite in the franchise.
Yeah, so agreed.
Jeff sours it because you got slow Jeff.
Yeah. Oh, 50-foot Nerd has put, if he just stayed in the box the whole time, the movie would have never happened. Or he'd broken his neck in the box for, again, the same.
Yeah. I can't agree more strongly with you, Pete, as well. Like, it's so, that whole bit when you go like, oh, it's Amanda's test, and that sets up loads of kind of that theme for the rest of the franchise as well, of it being like someone's test that you didn't quite, it's something else going on. Yeah, I think it's one of the best kind of twisty endings. And also,
I think John dying is part of the twist. No one probably really thought he would get killed.
And the way
that's the most shocking thing about that one, is that they actually kill John.
Yeah,
and it's not like, did they kill him? They really kill him. They really you're absolutely sure. Also, I don't think I noticed it as strongly before, but just watching it this time, when John realizes that Jeff's failed and is about to cut into his neck with the saw, he breaks into this such a psychotic grin. It's so good. Like, the performance of that is unbelievable. He's so happy that he was proven right, and that by being proved right, he's going to have his head cut off, basically. He's just like, just lies back and grins, and you're like, oh my God, yeah, it's terrifying. It's genuinely amazing, that bit.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I'm just correcting, as I said, what I said earlier, because I said that James Wan and Lee Winnell weren't involved in any others, but the third one, as I said, it was their story, and Lee wrote the screenplay as well. So
great.
Stand corrected.
I would also like to point out that the third one establishes the whole conceit that they reuse many times after this, where it's a person is in this vast warehouse and goes from room to room to room to trap, because the second movie, having a house with that they can kind of go around. I mean, the second movie doesn't really follow that pattern of like, okay, we go from this trap and then we get through, we go to the next trap. Okay, and now we're through. Now we have to go to the next trap. It's still a little more random. Whereas the third movie is the first one that basically is just like, okay, it's like an escape room. They got to go from this to this to this to this. That they repeat like ad nauseum after that. But it's the first one that really comes up with that conceit.
I have some really personally fun memories of the third one. One is my wife, who's my wife now. We just met before the third one, right? And
what a perfect date movie.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because the first proper date we went on was to go see World Trade Center with Nicolas Cage, and that was a bizarre choice for
Yes.
a date.
I can one up you, Al. One of the
Oh, yeah.
first dates I took MJ on was House of a Thousand Corpses.
Oh, great. Yeah, amazing. Well, we did World Trade Center. She wasn't like into movies that much, but she was like, "Oh, this guy seems to like film, so I'll just go along." She went along. She was like, "Oh yeah, that was a movie." And then you know, a couple of weeks after that, this came out, and we went with my friend, my brother, and me. We just all went as like a 4. And she was like, at no point did she say, "Not really into horror movies." She was so like keen to just impress me and go along for the ride. And what I didn't realize is she sat next to me and for the entire thing was like having a panic attack because she was so upset by it and frightened, especially when they started grinding the dead pigs. She was like, I'm not going to cope with this, but also I don't want to cause any trouble. And it was only like an hour after we got out of there and she'd calmed down. She's like, yeah, I don't like horror movies, actually. Okay, we didn't need to go and see that. But yeah, so we've always like laughed about that. But also it was that moment when the pigs come down. And I remember at the time I was always like trying to come up with a good idea for a slasher movie or something. And I remember thinking, wow, they've just done a death where someone drowns in rotten pig guts. There is no... It's all been done now. There was a moment where I was like, oh, everything's been done. There's no point. We might as well just give up. Truth is, it hadn't all been done. But like, you didn't think at that point in time, what was it, 2006? They'll never top this. That is madness.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
But he survives, that guy, actually, didn't he? Yeah.
Well, he survives that trap.
That
Yeah,
trap.
yeah,
Yeah.
that trap, yeah. Which you wouldn't. I'm not sure you'd want to. I just think like I said this to a guy the other day. Of all the saw traps, which one do you think like you'd most like to be if you had to pick one? Which one would you most like to be stuck in?
None of them.
And he went. He was trying to think of which one would kill me as quickly as possible, and I was like, that's a really interesting way to think of it, because I was thinking which one could I stomach to try and get myself out of, and he was like, no, which one's going to kill me first?
And that's my one problem with Amanda. She had to kill somebody. She didn't have to do anything to her person. Sometimes I think, as much as I love Shawnee Smith, they gave her too much credit for escaping that trap, because it's not like the detective from Saw 5, I think they all blend together, where he gives himself the tracheotomy to get out of the trap. She just had to kill somebody who she thought was already dead, pretty much, and cut out his stomach. So she really didn't have to overcome that much when you think about it.
Well, unless I guess the
like the
idea of
trap I would
being a
pick.
murderer is like something you're never going to get over, I guess. But yeah, you're right. She doesn't have to cut her own eyes out or anything like some of them do. Yeah.
God, it's Anyway, so those were the last ones. Oh, actually, no. Darren Lynn Bozeman also did Saw 4.
Yeah.
Director-wise, okay. But when we get on to Saw 4, we've got a different writing team that remain with the franchise through to Saw 3D. So up until Jigsaw, and that's Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan, who also went on to do I don't know whether you ever saw them, like a Saw adjacent film series called The Collector. You familiar with those?
I discovered it not long ago. Yeah.
Okay, 2 with the third, but I think those were originally scripts that were ideas for Saw that didn't.
That's right. Yeah,
didn't get picked, so they made their own film. So yeah, so Saw 4 then, and this again, my memory, but this is the one that starts with the autopsy, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Four had the really unique advertising aspect of, look, you saw him die. Here's his body. We're doing an autopsy, but we're also hinting that he's still alive somehow. How is he still alive? And like. The way that they did it was actually very clever, and it's actually the most clever thing about Part 4. But I guess we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, it's John's dead.
John's dead,
baby. John's dead. Yeah, right.
Yeah, for It's quite good. I think the sort of main storyline of the cop going through the traps is potentially one of the most forgettable. I'm not sure why. I don't know. I don't know that there's anyone at fault for that in terms of like the performances or anything. It just like I never, I've watched them all like a few times, a handful of times, I'd say, and I never remember that that's happening, and that's the majority of that movie. Where I'm like, and I don't really know why. I'm not sure. I can't put my finger on why. It's just like, oh yeah, that's this one. I forget that's a film because all I really remember about it is the end, and you go, oh, it's at the same time. Great.
Right, I was going to say, because this is where it starts becoming quite convoluted, right, in terms of the actual timeline, because we've got actual things that are happening at the same time as some of the other films, right? So I think you said actually it goes up to, in our years, it goes up to 2010, but most of that action is in 2004 to 2005. Is that right?
Yeah,
something like that. I think you
I have seen another, as well as yours, Josh, and obviously yours is the best. I've seen another.
You traitor!
3 weeks
you went to
recent
another one.
Movie timelines thing from CZ's World, and his is like he's like zoomed in on the picture of like evidence bags and stuff to find the dates, and so like it's nearly an hour long. We're not going to go through that now. But if you want to like find, he's gone through and found dates, and they all do stay pretty consistent except for a couple. But like,
no, I did that. I did that too.
Oh, you did do that.
Yeah, no, there's not only is there the evidence bags, but there the one I want to say it's like Saw 5 has a really handy. It's like there's evidence file folders, and they give a bunch of dates in that one as well too. So
that's right.
I have to say, from a filmmaking, world building point of view, I really love that sort of attention to detail. It's like, it always makes me think of films like Memento and Seven, where they've got like in Seven, you've got, John Doe's books, and apparently the level of detail they went to, according to Fincher on the commentary and everything, is the production designers and art department and all that, actually, they're not blank pages. They actually filled out character stuff and everything in every book. And obviously Nolan, with the details he has with the Polaroids and all of that sort of thing, with Memento, and that's what I love about these movies is just all of that, detail right down to dates and files. And
it gives me a new appreciation for like production design.
Yeah,
like talking to Josh because of his connection to the films with his wife's job and everything. I learned so much about like what has to go into setting up a scene, not just a normal background. Like, oh, there's that poster on the wall, there's this, there's that, and it gives me a better appreciation when you see, like you said, the attention to detail that they put inside of a set. Like, everything is there for a reason, and it's cool to decipher. Like, okay, why is that clock say that time?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. By the way, we've got another comment. So Zombie Killer Yamato said John's backstory is the best part.
And he's right,
don't they, in this one, right?
And he's right, but I will say, because I do not like 4 at all. I think 4 is one of the worst of the bunch. And the reasoning why is like, they do give you John's backstory, but none of it ties into what's happening in the current plot. So it's like literally just filling time. It's just like, here's a bit about John. Well, great. What insight does that give us as to what's happening in the movie that you're telling us? Nothing. It's just John's backstory.
It feels a bit, it feels like a bridge to, like, oh, we're introducing Hoffman. Don't worry about it. Just come back next year and we'll let you know why.
And see, that's the problem with 4, because...
But also, wait, hold up 1 second, because not only that, but you talk about tying into the greater things, 4 does, much like part 1, it gives you the big twist of this is going on at the same time as part 3, right? They're happening at the same exact time. But then it doesn't matter. Like, if they had tied it in and that like Riggs's plot line was important to how John's whole thing was going down with the other things, and if it all tied in together, I guess it would make sense. But no, it wasn't. You had Hoffman doing it, so it didn't really matter. Like you didn't. It was just a twist to be a twist again, to just have it be at the same time. But you could very easily have not had it be at the same time, and the movie doesn't change one bit, because then you just have Hoffman there running it all again. It's just so useless. And then I also hated the aspect of Rigg, this cop, who's going and doing all of these things and doing all these like trap scenarios with all these people, and never like, why wouldn't he ask anyone for help? No one's like, I mean, I guess they're like watching him, but like all he has to do is just, hey, can I get some backup on this? Like why is he doing it all alone?
Yeah.
And my biggest with Saw is that's when we started the Hoffman era, and most of his traps are you have to rely on somebody else to do something to survive.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that, like with Rigg, and you see that in other movies going on with the insurance agency and all that other stuff. A lot of these people, they had to rely on somebody else to do something for them to survive, and that takes the charm, so to speak, out of a John Kramer trap. And I never understood why Riggs was there, because he's a cop that wants to save people. What does he need to redeem about himself?
Yeah. Stop trying to save people, man.
It's like, don't try and save everybody. And it takes. This is where I have a problem with the Hoffman style traps. It loses the charm of the redemption that John Kramer had.
Well, and also from a writing standpoint, Hoffman's trap styles and even Amanda's trap styles are lazy, because the whole thing about John, as we said, is that John is very confused but thinks he's doing the right thing, and he is making these traps to be survivable. And so you, as a writer, have to go in and create these traps that somebody can survive and a way to get out of it, and blah, 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 and all that. With Hoffman's just trying to kill people. He doesn't care. He wants them to be dead. So as a writer, you don't have to think about any of that. And you're just now writing a completely amoral character that's just like a murderer. And that is so less interesting and so lazy in terms of the aspect of the villain, and just shows that the worst and best thing that this franchise did is kill John, because it killed John, and there was a big shock and surprising, and whoa, they had the guts to do that. But it was the worst thing because they had nothing to replace him with that was even remotely interesting.
And see, but that brings me, and I know we'll get to Jigsaw, but I noticed a change with Jigsaw, that they weren't Hoffman traps anymore. They were John traps done by Logan Nelson. That's why I liked Jigsaw better than some of the other films. And I know we'll get to there, because I think the style of traps went back to that John Kramer inspired trap.
Yeah. And am I right? This is the first film that brings Jill into the story.
Yay, Jill!
I love Betsy Russell, though. I think she's awesome.
Oh, what a waste! Oh,
you know
exactly for that reason. Yeah,
another pretty unlikable.
I liked Betsy Russell in Private School, not so much in the Saw movies.
Oh, hold on. There's been another comment here. So, Zombie Killer Yamato says 5, 6, 7, or 6, 7 are John traps willed to Hoffman to finish.
Yeah. So, because I was going to say, like, they are in the story. They are from John, aren't they? But it does get into a position where you're like, especially by 7, Hoffman's mainly going after people that might know that he's involved, and then it does feel like, what? But I guess if you give him the benefit of the doubt, because I'm always looking on the bright side with these things, maybe are they effectively trying to say, again, John's the most morally interesting, and the problem is that he died and left his trust in people that were just killers, basically.
Yeah.
Because Amanda and Hoffman both make the same mistake of making these traps that you can't escape from. But again, it's like, it probably would have been better to just keep him alive, and then we get to see more of the interesting stuff.
Yeah,
But
Rob,
yeah.
Rob Dawn's made a comment here. This series is frustrating in that without the twist from the first, there is no franchise. Yes, the entire series crumbles in every entry, needing a surprise twist at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I don't disagree with that, but I sort of do love it still. It's a weird thing where it's like, I can't, again, the scores, I can't wait for that last 5 minutes when we find out what's really going on. It's just, it's like an updated version of like a whodunit when you suddenly go, this is what's I've discovered, you know, but it's in that, and it's, you see it coming.
Yeah.
You know it has to, but if it wasn't, you'd be so disappointed. Like
And
if they made the 11th one of these and they just went, we're not going to do a twist at the end, you'd be like, oh, come on, man.
Them doing a twist every one, I think what may hurt it is people expect it. And when you don't get those expectations, they have like those diminishing returns. Like, oh, it's not as good as the first Saw. It's not as good as Saw 3. Because some of the twists were like, that's it? And I was just like, that, I mean, and like the twist, and then we'll get to Saw X, the twist was just like eye rolling, I think.
Well, and I will say that one of the most interesting things about these Saw movies, with the exception of one or two of them, one of the best things I can say is, for the most part, I didn't really see the twists coming. Granted, some of them were because they were like ridiculous, but you know, and those ones where it's kind of like, wait, what? Like it's completely out of left field. But there was other times like I did not see that Amanda, like I would not have guessed that Amanda was in on it. Like when I watched Saw 2, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. You know, and in part 3 when you know, it turned out that he was the doctor's husband, and I was like, oh, that took me by surprise. I didn't see that coming. When part four, when it was like, okay, this cop that's there, he was in. I'm like, oh, I didn't predict. So most of the time I wasn't predicting these twists. And granted, yes, some of them were dumb, which is why I didn't predict them. But I will say that at least Saw had that going for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they stay unpredictable. It's just that what's predictable is there always will be one.
Yes.
And I think that's they've sort of that they kind of can't not do that now. Because I think even
that kind of hurt what M. Night Shyamalan movies, because everyone's always expecting the twist, and then when you don't get it, people are then angry. But if you think about it, less than half of his movies actually have a twist.
Yeah. And they got worse as it went along. But he, you know, he peaked too soon.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Just a bit. Cool. I obviously want to try and get through all of these, and I'm conscious we're already an hour and 20 minutes in. So Saw 5. Well, anything to add about Saw 4 other than what you've already put? Saw 5, right? Uncle Pete, you might have to remind me, because this is where it's getting woolly now for me. Saw 5.
I thought it was your favorite one, Keith. It's right behind you.
I remember Saw 5 as it's got my crush Julie Benz in it, so which is why I love it, because I'm totally in love with her. So I like Saw 5 because of her character, and again, that ending where they're doing the blood sacrifice is just vicious. That's other than part 3 and like part 1 the ending with Lee Winnell screaming. You know, the ending in part 3, Saw 5 is my third favorite ending because of you see the saw going up their arm. They're trying to do that blood sacrifice. It's just so
I remember
so vicious.
Yeah, as soon as you said Julie Benz, I'm like, oh, I know the one. Yes.
Yeah.
But one thing I didn't like was Strom getting punked out by Hoffman. That annoyed me because I liked Strom. He survived one trap. He survived an inescapable trap by giving himself a tracheotomy with the pen he had in his pocket.
Yeah.
And then for him to go out like that, I was like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
What a way to go as well. The slow crush.
It's a really painful death.
Yeah.
I do remember when I first saw that one, like Hoffman lowering slowly into that glass thing. That was cool, though. It was a neat way of, because it was just so slow and agonizing, and you're like, there is no way out of this.
This is, I guess, with that character, it's kind of, you know, we were sort of saying about there isn't a a protagonist as such, because most of the characters are pretty unlikable, and obviously we're sort of, which we'll talk more about John Kramer later, but I guess that character, sorry, what was his name again? The cop who does he was kind of, for a couple of movies there, he was kind of our lead our lead protagonist, right?
That's who you had
to he's just in 4 and 5,
4 and 5.
I think he appeared. I think he like has a very minor part in 3. I think. I don't remember. I think if he shows up in 3, it's for like a second. But I think he's just in 4 and 5.
I think it's 4. Yeah, I think it's 4 because that's when the FBI get involved. It's 4.
Yeah. And
Perez, his partner,
Yamato, but Hoffman framed him as well, and obviously he's an agent, not cop. Yeah. And that's cool.
I got to tell you, when we did our ranking of the Saw movies, Saw 5 was just absolutely my dead last. I don't know how I don't know if I would reconfigure that with Spiral and everything, and I don't know if it would stay the same, but oh my god, do I not like this one? It's just it's the dumbest. It's just such a repeat of the last one, and everyone in the movie is so stupid, and like it lost me almost in the very beginning. Because when I first saw this movie, and again, the first time I watched this, I'm watching it for the channel, and I'm like really paying very close attention in order to watch it. The very first thing I said was, why doesn't, when they have the whole, like they have to walk forward and grab the keys, it's just like, why doesn't one guy just walk up and grab all of them? Like it was the first thing I said. And it took me like 5 seconds to think of that. And then when they get to the tube room with the bomb, and you had these gigantic freaking tubes, and they're all like, there's only 3 tubes, so we can only fit 3 of us. Oh no. I'm like, how anybody could not figure out that more than one person can go inside a tube. And like when they say it at the ending, it's just like a huge shock. It's just like, those tubes were big enough for more than one person. It's like, yeah, no kidding. No, duh. And like at that point in time, the movie completely lost me. And it's just like, how did they not figure it out at this point? That that's all they had to do was just go in there together. And it was insane. And then of course you spend a lot of time with flashbacks, and it's Hoffman, and like unfortunately they really failed to make Hoffman any sort of a compelling character. Like he was just a murderous asshole with nothing really interesting about him. And again, John was interesting. Hoffman, not so much.
They tried one thing with John, trying to get revenge for his sister, but then it's like they forgot it. Like, oh, he's almost redeemable. No, he's not.
Yeah. The one thing I did like about this one was that switch up at the ending, where you kind of think that Strom is victorious for a second, but then the movie pulls the rug out for you. Because I thought it was a very, like Uncle Pete said, I wanted Strom to come out on top because he showed his ingenuity earlier, and he was like struggling the whole movie. And you think that he's finally got the upper hand, and it's a very nihilistic, nope, flipping the bird at you. Sorry.
And I think you get that a lot in the series. Like any time that people are like Strom, there's just a few. Strom, Perez, I can't remember her name. Like not Eric Matthews, not partner but boss, maybe like the woman in 2 and 3, who gets ripped open. And
Dina Meyer's character.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and she gets ripped open. Like
Allison
she's
Carey.
pretty a good
Detective Carey.
Yeah.
And every time you're like, oh, they seem like good people, they are killed in like the worst way with no escape possible. And I think that you're right, Josh. Is like the nihilism is so, it's just right there, and you're like, they always do that. And I kind of see what you mean about 5. I find it quite entertaining in a way, but it's not good. It's all, like, and also the fact that apart from the trap storyline, the other storyline is like this cat and mouse thriller kind of vibe, where Strom is trying to work out who the hell is behind this, but we already know, so there's no real stakes to that.
Yeah.
So like the audience is going, oh, we know who's behind it. So we don't. So like you finding out clues and trying to work it out is like they're not interesting clues because we already know because we knew last film.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is an odd. It's an odd.
Well, then we go. I mean, that was the only one directed by David Hackle. Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan continue to write also this one and the next two, and then we move over to director Kevin Gruter. I think it's pronounced. I'm not too sure, but what's important is he does 6 and 3D, but he is also the director that's come back for Saw X. So, in terms of continuity as far as crew goes, we've got a director for the next two that, as I said, comes back to the franchise. So was 6 then an improvement on
Keith,
5?
I love 6 so much. Always have. Always will. Love 6. The opening of 6 is so mad. They're just immediately screaming and cutting their own arms off. And you're like, what is happening in this movie? It's so crazy. I love it. I love that there is a bit in 6 that immediately ties into Saw X. And you're like, wait, did you know what was going to be in Saw X? Or was that just a really helpful bit of information that you've gone back to get? I love it. And I got a feeling the other two of you hate it, so off you go.
Well, it's my second to last, but I put in my notes. I like the idea of him getting revenge on the insurance agency and all the writers who just say, they find reasons to purposely not cover people. I like that concept. I'm like, hey, this is the value of a life. Just the guy that played William Easton, it was just wooden acting from him. And the end with the mom and the son, and he pulls the lever. That was the big twist. That it wasn't his wife and son. It was. I just think it was executed really poorly. I wanted to like it, but it was just. And again, it was more Hoffman traps, which I wasn't a fan of. It was just. I didn't like the execute. The concept was there, but I didn't like the way it was executed.
Right.
Well, I feel like this episode is all shocks because Al, I'm with you. I actually really like this one. This is this is my second favorite of the batch. I think it's one of the more pure in terms of the concept of what the saw traps are supposed to be, where it's like trying to teach a lesson. And the interesting aspect is there's that twist of it where it's like the traps are supposed to be survivable, but it's a guy who's supposed to be evaluating life. So it's kind of like, okay, well, when you're like, but those people had no chance because, well, that's the point. The guy is responsible for their chances, just like in real life, but now he has to see it. And I thought that from a writing aspect, that worked really well with the themes of what they were trying to do. And I thought that just it was a really great little bit. However, anytime Jill was on the screen, the movie just stops dead. But it was great. And I thought that twist with that not being his wife and kid and was actually the wife and kid of somebody that he screwed over, it took me by surprise. And I was just, and then they had that whole little bit. And when he is like shouting out and he goes, "Look at me when you're killing me," I was pretty damn, sorry, that was the carousel trap that has that moment with the look at me. Like it had those little bits where it was very intense moments. And I thought it was very cool. And yeah, so I dug it. Again, not a movie I would call a good flick, but a good Saw flick.
That's fair. Yeah.
Well, and also it is kind of cool that some of this gets referenced right in the new film as well. So
that genuinely, I would love to find out, because the way that's referenced, because it's in a flashback where he's trying to get covered to see this doctor in Norway who's doing this experimental treatment, and it feels like, why would you make that so specific unless you had a plan to fulfill that storyline? Which makes me go, that is cool, because this is 2009 and 2023. Like, if you really did have that plan all along, bravo for the patience and just the commitment to sticking that out is great. And so even if it's not true, I'm just going to believe that was the plan all along.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it ends up being Mexico, but of course they mention Norway.
No, but the doctor's in Norway in Saw 10.
Yes, yeah, you're right.
And they have to move to Mexico because of the big pharma and all of that stuff. So
it does. Yeah, you're right. It does actually hold together, which is pretty cool. So
when I saw that bit again, I was like, oh, that's so good. But if that was planned, that was great. I loved it. Yeah.
I have an answer on that for you. It's actually rather interesting that you even bring that up because of so I do a monthly horror trivia night here in Burbank, and last month they had a Saw round. It was a round of Saw questions, and Kevin Grunert was supposed to be there, but at the last minute had to back out. But one of the writers of the film was there, and Kevin Grunert had written a couple of the questions about it. And one of the questions was, in Saw 6, John was unable to get a surgery by a doctor, whatever. What European country is that doctor said to be in? And of course, no one in the room got that one right. I think I said Switzerland. But he said when he was reading the answers, he was just like, he said, we actually took that little bit of dialogue and built that into the new script. So just with that comment that he made, I'm going to imply that, they basically took that little bit of dialogue and said, well, what if we did this off of that little piece? So it was not forethought out, but it was a writer seeing something that was there in an old bit and saying, we can do something with that.
Was that Josh Stolberg or Peter Goldfinger?
I don't know. I don't know who. I'm not sure which one of them it was.
Right.
I was not paying that close of attention at the time. But if I saw a picture of the guy, I could say him.
Okay. By the way, Per Appleman says, "Hey, you guys."
Hey.
Thanks for joining. No, that's cool. So obviously, Saw the 7th film, Saw 3D in 2010. This is off the back of obviously Avatar. With such a success, suddenly we're in that phase where everything is becoming 3D for the next decade or whatever. My first question is, did you guys see this in 3D?
Yes.
Yeah,
I did.
Two of us did, two of us didn't. Okay. What did you think, Al, of the 3D? Did it work for you?
I mean, I've never liked 3D in movie theaters or anything, unless I'm at a theme park and it's designed for that. But yeah, a narrative film like this, not interested in it. It was every time there was a 3D effect, it was the exact expectation of, oh yeah, 3D effect, yeah, that's so fun. Yeah, I just was like, also at this point in time, I just remember being like, oh, I'm kind of sick of Saw movies now. It definitely felt like they're coming out too much, and this is just slightly ridiculous. I just remember looking at the time and having watched it recently, just going like, this one feels cheap. This felt, despite it being like a bigger budget and a big like 3D cinema release, it actually felt more like a straight to DVD vibe to it. The performances, the way it looks, the edit, it just all feels a little bit kind of rough and not finalized. But I find that's often the case with these 3D movies because the technology takes precedent over everything else, over performance, over storytelling, because the technology, every time they do it, 50s, 80s, and then this batch where they did 3D, you always see the same stuff where it's like, oh, the shots were so important and so difficult that that's the only thing that anyone had the opportunity to care about. So I kind of don't blame anyone in front or behind the camera for this, because I can just picture that they're making this thing. That's the only important thing. The studio's like, it's got to be 3D, it's got to be 3D. That's all we care about. And so, like, you can imagine actors going, oh, I didn't do a good job in that take. But people going, yeah, but the 3D worked, so it doesn't matter. And that's how every moment in that film just feels like, oh, it's just all about that again. And it always happens. It always happens, you know.
Yeah. Like
Pete,
I said,
Pete,
mentioned
what do you
earlier,
think of it, Pete? Where
Like-
did it rank for you?
I the kills were uninspiring because, like Al said, they were written for 3D, not really tailored. And again, I like the idea. Okay, this guy is pretending to be in a saw trap, and then he survived and whatnot. Created a self-help group. Okay, let's tie all these stuff in, but it just it didn't work for me. Like, and like a lot of people he was trying to save were completely innocent. Again, because they were like Hoffman traps, like his assistant, his brother, the lawyer, and everything. They didn't know he was lying. And especially his wife at the end, the way she gets brutally murdered because and she was just supporting her husband the entire time. She's like, oh, okay, yeah, you lied and stuff. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. She was supporting him. And for her to get killed in that manner, I was like, she was 1,000% innocent. No way she deserved to even be associated with that trap. I just had a really big problem with that.
Yeah. No, I get it.
I think this is the one that actually comes closest to like what you were saying earlier, Keith, about the torture porn thing. In that it doesn't feel like necessarily that we're focused always on the tortuous moment, but it does feel like because of the 3D again. Pardon the explicit language, but like it feels like it's all cum shots, right? So especially the when finally the bear trap works, it's just like, this is awful. Because I don't care about this, because all it is an effect now. And no,
it is where it starts getting a little bit more focused on that. And obviously by this point as well in the actual story, hence that bit at the beginning with the guys in the sort of glass thing in the park is Jigsaw is got this sort of celebrity status by this point, and it's all a bit ridiculous.
Sorry, that sequence specifically as well reeks so much of someone going, we've seen all of these traps like in a dark and dingy warehouse and stuff. Do you know what would be cool? Broad daylight. And everyone thinks that's a cool idea, and then you watch it and go, "Oh no, it isn't."
Well, oddly enough, because I think this movie's terrible. I think this is easily, probably the worst of the bunch. At the time, I had ranked it dead last, but I actually did like the opening kill because it was broad daylight and because there was people watching and they had like a crowd. It just felt unique and different. And like it was executed pretty well. I thought that it was kind of like, a fun thing, and where it was like it made sense and they like solved their problem. And I thought that like I liked that. And then everything after that just goes completely off the rails, and it nothing is ever even halfway decent after that. And like as soon as they had a dream sequence, which felt so out of place in this franchise, that's when I knew, okay, this is just now it's completely problematic. And like this is the Saw movies in general don't seem like particularly like misogynistic, like we're gonna like really kill women, and like we don't like it seems pretty even-handed, I guess. I mean, there's one point in which I think it was like 3, which is like, well, we're gonna kill this woman, but we're gonna make sure she's naked.
The freezer.
But beyond that, it's not really egregious. But this movie seemed to really delight in like, we're gonna kill the ladies and do it in like a really painful way. The women are gonna get it the worst, and you're gonna like it. It's like it felt a little more intense than normal, and just such an anticlimactic. Like you're billing this as the final episode of the Saw saga, and the ending is such a like a silent fart. It just completely didn't work. And so unappealing. And then it's like, oh, it's the finale. Oh, but wait a minute, Dr. Gordon, and he's in on it.
Yeah.
He also has acolytes, so maybe it's not the ending. It's stupid.
Now I must admit,
I hated how they made Hoffman pretty much the Terminator in the police station, like Zombie Killer Yamato said. he's just plowing through everybody like it's nothing. Like it's like all their first day on the job. He just easily just kills everybody and just walks on out
with like a 3-inch blade, just walking up to people. Yeah, like no CCTV. Like what? Yeah, it's yeah. I think you're right, Josh, as well. It does feel like, I think it's because that opening kill. It's like, again, she's a slut.
Yeah.
And then it's like, we're going to kill her. And at no point is that an interesting moral quandary of a trap. It's just like, it's just gross. It just feels really uncomfortable.
No, I must admit, at this point, it did feel like it was getting tired. And of course, you know, it was the last one for a 7-year period. Killer Zombie Yamato has said the police station massacre is the worst anti-Saw part of the movie. And Rob Dawn has said, how in the world would they have ever been able to set that up in public undetected? Very, very, very true.
I mean, that's like all the movies, though, really. Like the fact that John is able to do all of this with no one realizing it, like, you know, there's people renting these warehouses. There's like no one's around these warehouses hearing like all this stuff being, but like the fact that no one picks up on any of it is pretty. In most of the movies,
I can sort of buy that a bit. I think if there's anything positive though, based on what Josh was saying about that opening one, it does. If it had been executed better, there is quite an interesting sort of question about culture in that. You kind of go, hey, imagine if this really happened. Would people just watch and film it on their phones now?
Yeah.
And like,
yes.
There's quite an interesting view of society where you're like, yeah, we probably would. Like, no one would call any like police or anything because you just would never believe that it was a real thing. You'd just be like, oh, this is cool. Film it. Yeah. And then maybe I'll get some views for it. And that, you know, it almost felt slightly ahead of its time, that thing. Yeah. But it was just executed so badly.
I did laugh when the woman went to go hit the window with the leather briefcase.
Yeah. So there's little moments like that, but it always feels like it falls short. And again, I just think it's because the technology of getting the shots working would have been just everything on the set. And you lose it.
Yeah. Well, before we move on, there was also a comment by Per Appleman saying, I think it's very nice listening to you chatting about movies.
Oh.
Great, good vibes. So that's nice feedback.
That is lovely.
So now we get into there's a 7-year gap, and then the next 3 films were all written by Josh Stolberg and Peter Goldfinger, and the first one of those, Jigsaw, is directed by the Spierig brothers. And Jigsaw's interesting because Jigsaw is kind of both a prequel and a sequel, right? Although we're not supposed to know that until the reveal. But as you pointed out, Josh, it doesn't really make sense because they've got kind of 2010 technology in 2004, right?
Yeah.
It's also quite a bizarre, like slightly meta twist that the twist is this is a prequel and a sequel.
Yeah.
Right.
Which isn't like a twist within the world. It's literally a twist. Again, it's an audience twist. It's like this film's both.
Well, and it's where they break the timeline, because up until this point they had a very concise, very set timeline where they had already established that, okay, this guy in the razor wire chair, who was the guy that killed John's killed John's unborn child, that was his first trap. And from the way that they established it was that very likely the traps that they echoed in the first, like flashback to in the first movie, were like his very first traps. And that then now you're suddenly telling me that he had all of these super advanced traps and this whole warehouse full of a whole game going on. And it doesn't really fit in with the chronology that they had already established.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Uncle Pete, where do you sort of rank Jigsaw in the?
I put it in my upper half. I actually like this one. I like Logan Nelson's character, that, you know, he got saved because John realized he just made an honest mistake, and he started out as a protege. Then he wanted to go enlist in the armed services, and then he came back, and I think his traps had that Jigsaw, John Kramer Jigsaw style charm to him. Because granted, they were all copycats, 10 years later. But I like how, John said game over, but I like how with Logan Nelson, he's like, I speak for the dead. So those traps had a theme behind them. These people's mistakes caused other innocent people to die, and they have to answer for that. So it kind of got away from the Hoffman style traps, and it kind of made me feel a little more John Kramer-esque style traps, which they were. And I just like him speaking for the dead, that whole thematic part.
Yeah. And I guess, when, Billy comes out on the tricycle, which is obviously a staple of the franchise, but the guy's reaction is, well, that's not creepy at all, right? And if you think about it, that would be kind of the first person to see that, right? I suppose, ish, if that sort of fits in the timeline.
The interesting thing about this flick is that it's kind of more of the same. It's really not doing anything that you haven't already seen. But, it's the first one to really break that aesthetic. It doesn't look like the other movies. It doesn't have that like drab, desaturated look. Things are brighter, more vibrant. The dialogue between the characters is a little sharper and jokier, which and the pacing is tighter because it's like it feels like it clips along a little bit better. And I actually really liked Jigsaw until the twist, which if they had just gone with Logan was unconnected, and just a random dude that liked John's methods and was, using it to get his own personal vengeance or whatever like that to get it. I just hate the concept of like, oh, John realized that like he didn't have a chance, so he saved him. It's just like, well, there was several other points in several other movies that qualified under that same exact thing, and he didn't intercede in any of those. So why is he interceding now? Like, it doesn't make any sense that he would interject there. So from that aspect, it kind of blew it. But I did think that this one was pretty watchable for what it was.
Right, yeah. Zombie Killer Yamato says, we don't see, he's already corrected this in another one, his traps, not kid traps there. It's not kid traps. We don't see his traps, just the flashback one aside from the laser collar.
Yeah.
Which is a good sort of evolution, right? The laser collar of the tech that he'd been using. But
but it also feels slightly in the sci-fi realm and therefore not in keeping.
Yeah.
And I know it is because it's like further in the future and it's a different guy doing it, but it does feel, especially when it actually goes off, you're like, I'm not sure that is how a head would splice.
Well, and going back to what Rob Dorn said, how on earth would they get that body hanging in the middle of a public park? Because there's a lot of people in that park, and like the impression is that those people are the first ones seeing it. And it's just like, it's a crowded park.
Yeah. I remember that was always the advertising for this, wasn't it? The teaser trailer and whatever started with that. Yeah.
So it was either that body had been hanging there for a while and no one noticed, or like somehow they just dropped the body down right then, but nobody saw who did it.
Yeah, I kind of agree with both of you in a weird way. Like, it's funny with this one, because this one I did not see in a cinema at all. I've seen this twice.
Okay.
And I've only seen it... So I've seen it twice. First time I ever watched it was, like one of my best friends when we had the first like COVID lockdown, we were just watching all these films remotely together, and we started with all the Saw movies. Like that's how that whole thing started. And since then we've watched like 400 horror movies in a row, whatever. But this was like, we watched all the Saw movies like one every night, and there was nothing else to do. It was just like super COVID times. I was just like doing that. And this was like night 8 of 8. And it just felt like, I am actually good, like a little bit bored of the formula now. And so with this one, it just felt like they're not really doing anything, like you said, Josh, they're not really doing anything special, even though it's quite a good version of it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think actually if I'd have seen this in a cinema and had been waiting 7 years for it to come out, I probably would have like had a lot. I would have felt a little better about it. And again, the only other time I've seen it is like 3 days ago when I watched them all in order. And again, I was at the point where I was like, especially after Saw 7, you're like, oh, I'm a bit bored of this. So I don't feel like I've ever given it a good enough chance. But I also do think that the twist is so dishonest, partly because of the flat screen TVs and partly because they show no hints that the game is in the past. They like at no point do you like they're not in all the others. There's little moments where you go, oh yeah, if you watch that again, you'll see what we were setting up or we were telling you, we were hiding in plain sight. With this, it's like they're actively trying to say this is happening now, and then they go, oh, it wasn't really, and you're like, oh, but yeah, it just never felt like an honest twist. It felt
I know what you mean. I mean I saw it at the cinema when it came out, and I have to admit I felt that it at the time it was a welcome return because I didn't think it was a bad movie. I thought you know it had its flaws, granted, but I kind of liked the way it sort of tied in, but yeah, obviously I can never unsee those flat screens now. Josh has pointed that out.
Oh yeah,
it's like. Well, but it's funny that they made that mistake actually, because when you think of the level of attention to detail that they'd had across the films, because you know we're talking the same producers, we've got a different director and stuff, but you know the attention to detail across it has been very, very well thought through, and it's actually a shame.
But that is why I do think the twist is potentially dishonest, because I think that is a conscious decision. They're trying to trick you by putting in modern technology into something that's meant to be before it's wide, and that to me that is like, well, that's not an honest twist. That is
you're right.
Devious trick to me.
I partially disagree there, Al, and the only reason why I partially disagree is because when I rewatched it, because I've only seen this movie like twice. I think I watched it once for Timeline and then once for Dead Last, but when you rewatch it, and it's the woman who gets poisoned in her neck, right? And then they find that body, and they find the body like right afterwards. Like the police find the body. Like when I rewatched it, and it's just like, how did they get the body out and then get it to the police? There doesn't seem like enough time for that to have happened. I think there's a couple of minor hints of like because the aspect of them getting in there, getting that body, and then transplanting it to a place that the police could find it, and then the police finding it, it's a very, very short window of time compared to the amount of time that has passed within the trap with them inside. So I think that's like the first time that you realize it's like, oh, there might be something time happening here, but it's subtle enough that I think that it's super subtle, but it did catch it up there. But
and also, so if you think about it, because it happened 10 years apart, did somebody else jam her with all 3 syringes so she died in the same manner?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I'll buy that. I'm happy with that. I'd never really noticed that stuff before. So,
as I like to say on our Discord, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Fine.
It's not a bad movie. It's not a good one.
No.
It's fine.
Yeah. No,
I do honestly think I would like it more if I had watched it in a different way. I think that if you watch them all really quickly and the follow-up to the final chapter, it does feel like, ugh. Whereas I don't feel that way at all about the next one.
Okay, well, let's move on. So I remember, so we got Spiral from the Book of Saw from 2021, and obviously this brings Darren Lynn Bousman back, who had obviously done 2 through 4 previously. Now, I don't know about you guys. I first remember hearing about this one. I think it was on a podcast or something I was listening to, a sort of movie news thing, and they sort of said that, you know, Chris Rock is a big fan of the of the series, and had come up with a basic idea that they were going to develop, and he was going to, you know, take the lead role in this, and a more dramatic role, a less comedic role, and all of this sort of thing. And we do spiral, you know, from the Book of Saw. Now I'll be honest. Well, I'll say this before we sort of get into it. I've got a few problems with this one, and yeah. But the thing I didn't like about this one was the copycat killer, you know, which was obviously the twist. But the traps in this, you could, you know, for everything of all the ridiculous traps in the franchise so far, you know, potentially most of them you could get out of if you did something horrible, right? But with this one, there was no way of getting out of any of these traps. So it was more of a mean-spirited, more of a torture porny type film. Although obviously, you know, we've got like Samuel L. Jackson, and we've got some sort of gravitas to the film from that side, and obviously what's his name, Anthony Mingala's son,
Max,
thank you. I forgot Max Mingala and all this sort of thing. But I don't know, I enjoyed it for what it was, and I bought that it sort of took place in the same world as, but I didn't think it was as well thought through as some of the other ones. That's just me. What did you guys think? Pete, where does it rank for you?
It's in the lower half. When I first started, I'm like, okay, Chris Rock in a serious role. And like the first act, I kind of appreciated what he was trying, but then it just fell apart for me. And like the traps were really like, normally like the trap, it has something to do with why the person is there.
Yes.
But one, okay, you need to pull all your fingers off and you only have this amount of time to do it. I was like, I'm not saying you're not making it fair, but the traps really didn't hit it for me as far as it. And like, I liked the concept. He wanted to go get dirty cops because his father was killed by a dirty cop. Okay. And it just fell apart in the execution. And like with Chris Rock at the end, I couldn't buy him as serious. And especially he, like the last third act, he was just squinting the entire time. I know because he had the glass shards and stuff, but that last act, he was just kind of squinting the entire time. I was like, why are you waiting there and not beating his ass? Because like, oh, I'm only going to give you one bullet. You can't tackle him and then beat him up and then knock him out and then get your dad down. It was just like, why are you not doing anything?
Yeah. I did like the fact, by the way, that we've moved from micro cassettes to USB stick. I was like, yay, there you go. We've moved forward. So it'll be interesting to see if Josh and Al have similar opinions on this one. So Josh, what did you think of this one?
I hate it. This possibly would be my, if I were doing a new ranking of these, this might be my dead last. I find it completely and utterly joyless, uninteresting, repetitive, and the worst part is, for a Saw movie, which, like I said before, even if the twists were ludicrous, at least they were kind of unexpected. The identity of the killer was so freaking obvious. The very second that they were just like, this character died off screen, it's like, okay, yeah, the Saw movie is going to kill a character off screen. Okay, so that guy's not dead. Okay, so he's the killer. Great, perfect. And then it's like the movie at the ending, it's like everything points to this guy is the killer. And in the movie at the ending, it's like dun 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 dun. It's like, here is the killer. It's like, yeah, we know. We knew a half hour ago. Why are you treating this like it's any sort of surprise? And it's just so predictable and dumb. And the thing that bothered me about it was, you're making a movie. Chris Rock had this idea to make it about the police, and you're making it at a time where criticism of the police was at its highest, and you had a great option to actually make a point about police abusing their authority and how that whole thing works, and some of the indiscretions that go on, and maybe someone should be held accountable for all this. And it does nothing with it, and it just becomes like, yeah, these people are bad people, so we're gonna kill them. And there's no perfect opportunity to make some sort of statement, which is what you probably thought Chris Rock would wanted to do, because Chris Rock, fairly forward-thinking dude. I'm sure he's wanting to be like, well, yeah, I want to make a comment about police violence and police, going above the law and everything like that. And then it's nothing. It's hardly even a plot factor in the movie, and it's no statement is made, and it just ends up being it's another Saw movie, just without any of the things that make Saw movies even remotely interesting. Hate it.
Fair enough. So, here's the twist. Al, I've got a feeling you like this one. I don't know why. Come on.
The main thing is what I really appreciate about Chris Rock in this movie is that finally he kept my wife's name out his fucking mouth. Oh, man.
Are you saying they should have made Will Smith
the truth is,
yeah, Will Smith was Jigsaw.
I have a few thoughts about it. Everything that Josh and Pete have said, I find very difficult to disagree with. Having said that, I don't hate it. I've seen it 3 times, and each time I've been like, that entertained me for an hour and a half. Yeah. Cool. It does feel like a Saw movie that always falls short of all the Saw things, because none of them are as good as the originals. So like the voice on the pig mask isn't as good. The voice isn't as good. The iconography isn't as good, but it's close. So all of them are sort of close, but because it's categorically, this is not Saw, this is Spiral, it feels like, yeah, but you're doing all the same stuff. Yeah, I like the t-shirt. You're doing all the same stuff, but like, they're not as good. The things aren't as good at it. So like the little voice on the tape, I think someone went, oh, that
not
sounds
even
creepy.
A tape, though.
Or the thing. If someone probably went, that sounds creepy.
The MP4 is not as good as the magnetic tape. Yeah.
But yeah, like there are so many flaws with it. There's a lot of stuff it feels like it falls short. Completely agree with your point, Josh, about like the police, and that could have been so much stronger. But I still find it, if you're sitting down watching them all, I'm still like, yeah, this will entertain me for an hour and a half, and I'm happy with that. And yeah, like I don't feel that strongly about it any other way, really. Yeah. I think I do like the Pete getting the glass. That's a cool trap. I do think that's a good trap, and I think it's one of the only ones where you're like, oh, he has to learn to sacrifice a bit of himself to take care of this guy that he's got this history with.
The one thing I did like about is I can't remember her name, the female agent, that I think she was one of the smartest victims in the entire franchise, because as soon as she saw the person in pig mask, she drew a weapon, backed up, then the door locked. She tried to shoot the door lock. Okay, it's metal. They throw over the gas canister. She kicks it away. She puts the rag on her, she puts her jacket over her mouth. Mm-hmm. She didn't waste time with playing the tape and trying to sever her spinal cord, probably one of the hardest traps. So as far as a victim, I think she had one of the best performances and the smartest as far as trying to survive from before she was abducted till when she was trying to sever her own spinal cord. So to me, that was the best part of a disappointing movie.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, I didn't hate it, but it's not one of my favorite ones. And I agree totally with Pete about the fact that the traps weren't in any way related to the crime or the whatever the victim had done. There was no relationship to it, and that seemed kind of thinner than we'd had. But as a adjacent film to the John Kramer stuff, it's okay, I guess.
I appreciate that someone tried to like expand the universe and do something a little bit different.
Exactly.
And I have history of always appreciating that. But Halloween Ends. But
don't. Oh God,
it's not great.
Please, no. So that brings us obviously right up to present day, and Saw 10, Saw X, whatever, and which is obviously timeline wise takes place in 2004 between the first and second movie, not in a new continuity, but in this continuity. And yeah, I mean, this one, Tobin Bell, right? Jigsaw John Kramer. I mean, I'm just so pleased that after all these films, he's really got one that's about him. It's kind of like he takes center stage for this one. But it was funny, I was talking to Al about this before we said, oh no, we mustn't discuss it, we got to wait till until this. But I said to him that the one thing I did say, and he said, oh yeah, make sure you say that in the live stream, was I said the problem is, it's almost like he's become Dexter because we're totally 100% rooting for this guy who is obviously the villain of the entire franchise. But by this point, we're kind of, empathizing and sort of on his side. And, even though he does these despicable things, it's like, I said, it's like he's become Dexter or something, as that immoral person that we can't help but like. And
that's why Julie Benz should have stayed for this one as well.
There we go. Yes, Dexter's wife in there. But I mean, I thought this was actually quite strong. But I'm very interested to know what you guys think as we sort of break it down. So who wants to jump in there first?
I just watched it this morning, so it's really fresh. I actually liked it. It's in my upper half, kind of, because the traps were vicious, and I like it when the trap coincides with why the person is there. Yes. And I think this one had a lot of emotion because John was putting everything in, thinking he was going to get a cure for cancer, and he got like hoodwinked. He got swindled by these people, and he was just, you can tell it's just the anger, and there was a lot of emotion to this. And like I give credit to Tobin Bell's performance. Like, he had no empathy for these people. He's like, nope, you're here for a reason. This is going to suck is pretty much what he said. Like, he had someone cut their own brain out. That's one of the most violent traps we've seen yet. Here, take a piece of your brain out. But they were still survivable in a way. And like the girl cutting her leg off, very well done.
That was particularly awful. I thought
that was very well done.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was, I liked it. I liked it. But now, Josh, I liked it more till I heard what Josh said about the ending and saying it was really, big coincidence. I was like, yeah, that did take me out of it. The coincidence that John knew they were going to do all this. But that aside, I actually enjoyed it pretty much.
Fair enough. Josh, do you want to jump in there about this, or do you want Al to go first?
Yeah, go ahead, Al.
I feel like he's going to put the nail in this one. I'm probably with Pete there. Really, I think it. I really liked it. I just thought that it was kind of like you were saying, Keith, and we touched on it when we saw each other, that it was kind of it was the perfect place for it to go, where we're like, let's really actually just say John's the hero of this one and see how the audience can deal with that. And it genuinely, as of all of them, like, they've always touched on this moral ambiguity of his philosophy and stuff. This one, I think, is the most, like, puts the most pressure on the audience to look at themselves, because the people that are in the traps are seriously bad. Like, they're crooks, like dangerous, like bad criminals that have killed people. And most of the people, as we said earlier, like, a lot of people just aren't very happy in their marriage, and that gets them in a trap. And you're like, okay, that's pretty rough. But like in this case, we've got serious criminals who are flying around the world, destroying people's lives and taking all of their money when they're about to die of cancer. Like, these are pretty reprehensible people. But, as an audience, we have to say, that doesn't mean that you have the right to just have them kill themselves in traps and take pieces of their brains out. But it's like, in terms of that moral question, I think it's the most interesting one of all of them for that reason. But you can't really have this one without having everything that came before it. And for that reason, I think as a 10th, it's like, this is exactly where a 10th film can go in a franchise like this and still be kind of relevant and up to date and everything like that. And and just like having, like you said, having Tobin back. I've seen someone online quite over the top say he should be nominated for an Oscar. That seems mad, but at the same time, it's an incredible performance. It's just that, like, people don't give Oscars to movies like this, but you kind of go, it is great. He's absolutely committed to that role. We absolutely buy him. As Pete said, you kind of feel for him. It's emotional. It's moving at times. Like, this is a story about him, and he absolutely nails it.
And they made him look like he was dying in the beginning, like his sunken in, like he looked like he was sick.
Well, that's the thing. Like you said earlier on, Al, because he's a cancer patient. The fact that Tobin Bell is clearly older than the character is supposed to be at this point, but it doesn't really distract too much. By the way, Zombie Killer Yamato has put, that's the father who is in Norway and his daughter's doing the con. And then he put, I think at least. Yeah, that's right. I think that makes sense. Yeah.
But but that point as well, as we mentioned with Saw 6, I love that those two now feel like this sort of like they work together as films, 6 and 10, and that's a really cool thing. And I know, like, separately, a lot of people at the moment are talking about where's the Halloween franchise going to go, and everyone's going, oh, maybe we could have a sequel to 4 that everyone actually likes, and all of this stuff. And this almost feels like it's a prequel to a lot of what happens in 6, and almost like a tie-in with that, because you've got the insurance story, and then this is the thing that would have happened, after he tries to get the insurance. And that, again, I just really love that they've managed to connect that, and it works for me. Sure. But now Josh is going to destroy everything.
Yeah. Well, Josh, first of all, from a movie timeline point of view, does this hold up?
As far as I can tell, I mean, I would probably have to. I was not watching this with my timeline eye, which is where I'm like pausing on things and like looking for things and like looking for that. I was just watching this to appreciate it. When I watch movies to analyze it for a timeline, I pay much closer attention. I will say that the one thing that I did notice was when he's on his computer, his desktop was very old looking and did a good job. And it looked appropriate early 2000s, and like everyone was on flip phones, which I thought was
almost. The video would not have streamed in that quality back then.
That is a point. But overall, I mean, this was fine. I didn't like. I had no real ill will towards it, but I didn't. I mean, especially with this actually being like one of the first like fully. This is the fresh Saw movie, and like it's getting good reviews and people love it. And I had higher expectations for it. And honestly, when you're dredging up an old franchise and you're just like, we kind of said we're done with this, but we're going to bring it back up again. A lot of times I'm always thinking, okay, why? Like, what do you have to say about this franchise that you need to go and dig this thing out of the mothballs and put a new one out? What do you want to say? And what you find out is that nothing. Like, this doesn't really tell you anything that you didn't know about John Kramer or Jigsaw or his traps. Like, you don't, after this movie's over, it's not like you're looking back and you're like, that gives you a new perspective on anything from the previous movie. It doesn't give you anything new perspective. Like, and again, if you don't watch this movie, the entire original storyline is still fine. Like, it's still intact. So it doesn't change anything, alter anything. And so it kind of feels unnecessary. It's kind of just like, here's just another trap you didn't know about, and it's, you know, more excessively violent. And like I said, I actually appreciated the more like weird aspects of some of the earlier traps, and I wasn't a big fan of like, oh, how painful can we make this look? Like that to me is not that interesting. I thought the more interesting ones were the ones where they were like a moral one. Like I did like the seesaw test at the ending, I thought was the most kind of a test that I want to see. Not so much that you got to cut your own leg off and pump like bone marrow out. That's just gross, and that's not what I want to see from like a trap. Like that's just torture stuff. And like the cutting the brain out, I thought was just like excessive and kind of dumb. I didn't like that. But my biggest problem was, and this I'm going to tie it into something that you said, Al, is the moral quandary, right? It's asking the audience to come up with this moral question. But my problem with this movie is it didn't ask you a moral question. It told you the moral answer. The earlier movies gave you the moral question because, like you said, you had people like, yeah, I kind of think the Jigsaw's right. And you go, is he right? And in this movie, they're like, Jigsaw's right. He's got the happy ending. He's got the kid. You know, they're walking out hand in hand into the literal sunrise. Like he's the hero of this movie, and the movie just pushes that way too hard. That John's the hero and he's justified in doing this. And no, he's not. He made a dude cut part of his own brain out. That's a terrible thing that a terrible person did to somebody else. I don't care if that person committed crimes. He doesn't deserve to have to cut his own. A woman does not deserve to have her to have to smash open her leg and arms with a sledgehammer because she like swindled some people who were wealthy. Like, I'm sorry. Like she was from Mexico. Like she was probably very, very poor. Like it was most likely a desperation situation, and you're forcing her to smash her body parts with a sledgehammer. And the audience, we're supposed to be like, oh, John did a good thing there. No, he didn't. And the movie wants you to think that. When John is like, we need to get her to a hospital. She passed her test. And the lady's like, I'm just going to kill her. And the movie's like, oh, look how bad she is. John wanted to get her to a hospital, but she wanted to kill her. So John's the good guy, and she's bad. And it's like, no, she only had to go to a hospital because you forced her to smash her arm and leg with a sledgehammer. You're not the good guy. And the movie is frustrating for amping that up of like, yeah, he's the hero. He's the hero.
But that is why the question is good. That's why.
A question, though. That's the thing. It's not a question. The movie is telling you the answer, and that's my problem with it. Is that if it was the question of who is the good guy here, who is the bad guy, is John justified in doing these things? That's fine. But the movie's telling you that he is justified, and the movie's get too far good. Into he's the hero.
That's why it's good. I genuinely think that's why it's good, because you're right, it is doing that, but I think that's when movies like this can be like genuinely boundary pushing, and this really isn't because it's a Saw movie, but that is like they're saying like this is the world we're presenting you, and your visceral reaction to it is why it's a more interesting film, because you go, that's not right. I'm going to liken it to another movie, and in no way is the quality even in the same universe. But it reminds me of the same feeling that Taxi Driver gives you, in that you're presented with your protagonist is a racist, disgusting psychopath, right? Yes, he can.
Hey, shout out when he's done comparing Saw X to Taxi Driver, and I'll come back.
I told you I'm not comparing him, but what I'm saying is...
Travis Bickle of Saw, I love it.
I knew you were going to walk off. The point is, it's not the same. In no way the quality... Obviously, like, that just should be a given. I'm not comparing the two. What I'm saying is that audiences that went to see Taxi Driver and continue to watch Taxi Driver are presented with a a vision that's incredibly like, this is your protagonist. This is the point of view we stay with for the entire thing. This guy, who turns out to be a racist, psychopath, murdering bastard, right? And then he wins, and we're presented with everyone else that's around him is him, but even worse, right? And that's what this film does. In a completely again, the quality, nothing like it. But it's the same point of view and it's the same tone that they're trying to tell the film. And to me, films like that are really interesting, and they actually don't get made that much anymore because we've just gone through decades and decades of going like, no, here's the hero, and you know, there's some ambiguity, but this is the thing. I think it's a really kind of cool, bold move to go, we're going to stick with the bad guy, and you have to freak out about that. And if you don't, you're the problem.
But that's my problem. The movie tells you he's not the bad guy. The movie,
I didn't look at
but
it
we
that
know
way.
that he is. We know, as hopefully like decent people, that he is. But it forces you while you watch it to go, this is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem.
The world.
I feel very much like it's unfortunately it's kind of a film of two halves, and because you've got the first half of the film, which is really a little bit more of a character study on John Kramer, fills in some of the gaps in the sort of backstory that we've already got with him and all that. And for me, that's arguably the more enjoyable part of the film. But they have to have, for it to be a Saw film and please the Saw fans and have all they had to have the traps and the torture and all of that stuff in order to make it a Saw film, which again, particularly nasty ones in this, happening to pretty despicable people as well. But I do kind of agree with Josh in the fact that the only bit of the film I didn't really like was the kind of walking out with the kid at the end. Felt a little cheesy. I felt. I mean, it was great that the kid was fine, and I'm obviously pleased about that, of course. But I would have liked to have seen the woman antagonist, the what's her name, the one in charge of the corporation. We didn't actually. She got left there with her head sticking out.
She's still alive. Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't. I kind of wanted her to have the horrible death, sort of thing. So it's almost like, but
yeah. Also, see, because you want people to die horribly.
There you go. No, but I'd have liked actually something with. I'd like to have seen the kid go, but then John and Amanda have to sort of get across town to the warehouse for the stuff that happens in 2. I would have really liked that, well, not across town, sorry, across
country,
across the border, should I say? Across the country into another country to do that. But that's just me wanting the member buried
I think,
there.
Well, and also this movie did have, in my eyes, the potential for a more interesting aspect that we haven't seen in a Saw movie that could have been explored, which would have been interesting. Of course, they had to introduce this character that was also scammed, right? And of course, but then they had to have the twist, and that guy had to be bad.
That was easy,
but
yeah.
The more interesting aspect that they could have explored is by having him be that neutral person who stumbled into this trap going on. So John John doesn't know if this guy's guilty of any sins or needs to go into a trap or whatever like that. So he's a completely innocent third party that's just happened to be there, like a variable he didn't account for being there. And if we could have seen how he would have responded to this guy who's just like, you're crazy. Like I'm just like, how would John have handled that if he was just a regular guy who had also gotten swindled, but was like, no, you can't do that. You're torturing these people. Like that to me would have been the interesting moral question of like this person who's not Amanda crazy, because Amanda was like sort of trying to kind of like throw out some like bits of wisdom, but you know that she's nuts. So give me that third party who's the good person that is like, you have to stop this, the voice of reason. Could have been interesting. And then they're just like, nope. He pulls out a gun, he's bad. It's like,
See, and what you said, Josh, about there's no one to root for in this movie, but that's almost a common denominator with the Saw film. So to me, it was just like, yep, it's like, yeah, we know he's morally reprehensible. Like, no, these people should not be getting killed in this manner, because like when there's the one scene, the guy was about to steal money and John's like, smart choice. Okay, that was a clever nod, but the trap probably would have been, you got to cut both your hands and your feet off because you tried to steal $20. So a lot of time with his traps, they do way more than just try and teach that person a lesson. Like, you stole something, but we're gonna have to cut both your arms off. Well, that doesn't really weigh out sometimes.
That was the one trap that actually wasn't a real thing. That was just in his head, right? With the which again was the marketing, the tubes of the eyes making the X and everything. But
which I will also say annoyed me, because it was the equivalent of the dream sequence from Part 7. It's like,
you're getting into dreams. But did you guys obviously sort of in this post-Marvel world, you know, we have a mid-credit sequence. Did you guys stick around for that? Did you see the mid-credit sequence?
Not the copy I had.
Okay. Because the mid-credit sequence is basically, it mirrors a shot from the first film of the lights coming on in the bathroom, and you pan back, and basically the dude that put him onto the company about, you know, curing his cancer is there, but also Detective Hoffman turns up as well, and it's quite a nice.
I appreciate on how they try to tie this in. Like, you hear Hoffman on the phone when he calls, like, "Hey, detective, I need some help finding these people." So I appreciate what they tried to do. I mean, will I revisit this movie? Probably not. But when I compare it to the other Saw films, it's in the upper half.
Fair enough. Anything else any of you want to add about that? About Saw X?
No, it's Saw X.
I love that Josh and I finally got to have
fine.
We finally got to finally beef it out on something.
It wouldn't be a Let's See What's Out There podcast with you guys, live stream with you guys.
I was worried we were going to agree the whole time. It would have been very funny.
But you know, and I know, I know that this is probably doesn't need to be said, but I'll say it anyhow. But I always respect Al's opinion,
and I always respect yours.
Yeah.
In fact, often I feel quite easily swayed, but I stick to it because it's much more entertaining.
I know. Well, I mean, I like our conversations, and like, I don't know, like the one thing I always try to embrace with the movies, and even with Dead Last, is that like opinions on movies are who cares? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Opinion on
only a movie.
I don't care. Like,
no,
I can't be angry at somebody for liking something I didn't, or vice versa. Why am I going to be angry at you for liking Halloween Kills? It's kind of silly.
Yeah. And I like hearing the things that people liked about movies that I hate. It's interesting to me, like what hit for someone that didn't hit for me. Like that stuff is cool to hear about. So
agree.
And then of course with Saw as well. I mean, are we going to get another movie? Who knows? But
yes, we are.
Obviously, it's seeped into lots of other media. You know, there's comic books about it, but there's also, hence what I'm wearing today, there are actually attractions, and I don't know whether you got this in the US, but we had Saw the Experience here in London, which is essentially it's sort of like a faux escape room, but it's set up in the Saw universe. And I have to say, in terms of, it was so well done. Again, the attention to detail, the production design, the way they try and sort of make it fit into the story, all of that sort of thing. It took about just over an hour. and it was a fun time. Indeed.
It was well acted. I will say it was definitely well
there,
acted.
Yeah, you have it in the of course you have it in the US. Why am I even asking that question? Of course you've got it. Obviously, you guys invented it. Of course,
but they do not have Saw the roller coaster, which is a great ride at a theme park near here. Yeah,
so
it's good.
That's a rather that's quite a jarring ride, isn't it?
It throws you about a bit, but it does have a 110-degree drop where it sort of goes back on itself, and it is it's
just
intense.
Before
it's
the
good.
rotating blades. You actually think you're going to touch them, and then it tucks you in and drops you. Yeah.
It's good.
I think overall the movie was a step in the right direction. If you're going to continue the franchise, at least it was a step in a better direction than Saw 6 or Saw 7, when it was, a downslide. Do I want to see another Saw film? I have no desire really to see another 10. Nice round number. Just let's move on to something else. Let's see what else they can do.
10 films in 20 years. Yeah.
Pretty good. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. By the way,
I think what's interesting that it does give you by doing like what did you call it earlier, Keith? Integral? That's a good word.
Something that takes place between.
Yeah. But by doing that between 1 and 2, it does open up the possibility of like doing something between 4 and 5, and that's quite a cool little idea. Or more between 1 and 2, or something between 2 and 3. I quite like that possibility for the next one. But at the same time, they've probably done it all now. It's kind of done, right?
Zombie Killer Yamato says, I like Ends, but not as a Halloween movie, and not the movie marketing said it was the trilogy leading up to it. Yeah, it's kind of Halloween. Yeah, well, anybody's interested, they can go back and
we've said everything.
I love Josh's diatribes on it. I remember when Kills and Ends came out, talking to Josh on the Discord. I'm not going to make a video and talk about it. A few hours later, Josh is live making it. I was like, I got to talk about this.
Got to talk about it. Got to talk. By the way, Josh, some feedback here. So Per Appleman's also put, Josh, thank you kindly for doing the 80s project. Very nice job. I love it. Very nice job you do. I love it. So thank you for that feedback. That's
then lovely. You'll be happy to know that there's a new episode coming on Friday.
Right. Oh, well, anything before we sort of wrap this up, bearing in mind, God, 2 hours 37. Wow. Anything else that we need to say about Saw or the Saw franchise, or Tobin Bell, any of it, before we sort of bring this to an end?
Just overall, for one of the big franchises that in the last 20 years, it could be a lot worse. It could be a lot worse for one of the big franchises in the last 20 years. I'm a child of the 80s. To me, the 80s had the best, comics, movies, music, horror movies, everything. But for a 2000s franchise, it could be a lot worse.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat exactly. And I've always had a soft spot for this series of movies and media, hence the going to the experience. Al, you love it, right? Obviously.
I'm probably I think it's a solid 3-star experience start to finish. I think it's never, wow, that's the greatest thing ever. It's never terrible. Like, I don't think any of them, even the ones I don't think are like super terrible in the way that some of these franchises really have like brilliant and then super dips. It's just good, entertaining. Like, all of them entertain me. I'm glad it exists. I love the consistency. I love Tobin Bell.
Yeah.
Happy they exist.
Josh, in terms of ranking it amongst your, franchises, how does it fare?
Like I said, I'm never excited about watching Saw movies. And whenever I have to rewatch them for something to do with the channel, I'm always like, I gotta watch the Saw movies. But then when I'm watching them, I'm just like, all right, these aren't that bad. Like, all right, these are cool. They do some cool stuff. I like like I said, I like the aspect that they have of the ping-ponging timeline. I think it's interesting, and then the details that they do pull out, and like when you watch a later movie and you're like, oh, cool. I never really thought about that in that previous movie, and which I guess is what disappointed me about X, is that X had the opportunity to be like, oh wow, that really casts how they interplayed in a different light, but it didn't do that. But that's what the earlier ones did. It was kind of like, oh wow, if you rewatch that now, that makes their interplay a little bit different. So I like that they did that, and they're interesting to watch for me. So when they announce a new Saw movie, I'm never like, oh god, really? But I'm just never like, oh, cool, either. So it's kind of like it's in between. They announce a new song, I'm like, all right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I'm sure we're going to see more of it. I have to say, I like it from the world building point of view. As Al said, the consistency, definitely, and the attention to detail. You know, apart from the flat screen TV, which I'll never unsee now, damn it. But there you go. So, so in that case, Josh, tell us what's going on for you and where people can find more of your work. It looks like some of them are already, some of the viewers today already know your work, but for anyone who doesn't, plug away.
Well, yep, you can go check me out on Movie Timelines right here on YouTube. And yeah, I have a book that's available called Timelines of Terror, which you can get on any major bookseller site, whether it be Amazon, Barnes & Noble. What's the big site in England?
Waterstones.
Waterstone, but yeah, Waterstone, you can order it there. It is available pretty much anywhere books are sold online. It's not in stores though, but you can order it online, no problem. Also, I have a movie coming out, and I believe in about a month or so. I think it's going to come out in November. It will be available. It is a sarcastic take on the Amityville saga called The Last Amityville Movie, and it is a horror comedy that will arrive from SRS Cinema in November.
So how will we be able to see this, Josh?
So it'll be available on Blu-ray and DVD, which will be ordered through SRS Cinema in November. And then shortly after, I think he said it'll be like a month or two afterwards, it will be available on streaming sites, most likely Tubi. I don't know about other sites, but definitely Tubi. So it'll be available to view.
Awesome.
Right.
Look forward to seeing that. And maybe we'll do an Amateurville timeline.
I'm down for it.
There you go.
That's a great idea.
Al, tell us where people can find you, what's going on with you at the moment.
You know, I'm terrible at those things. You know, I do a lot of things. I make some films now. Again, I'm still in the presently trying to raise money for a horror film as well right now, which is easier said than done. But we carry on, and yeah. Apart from that, there's a bunch of shorts at that website on the screen there. And I'm currently very busy making a lot of stand-up comedy specials for all kinds of different comedians and stuff. So that's what I'm doing. But yeah, I can't sell myself. You should do it for me.
No, you should really check it out. You do a really good podcast. What's the title of your podcast?
Oh yeah, I do it very sporadically. It's called Random Conversations About Movies. It's very long, deep dives into movies. So if you've got like an 8 hours car journey, then it's...
I've done it. I've done it. I listened to your John Grisham adaptation deep dive. Amazing. Yeah. And also your appreciation of the Star Wars prequels episode was very enjoyable. So guys, check that out. If you're watching this and you've got this far, please check that out. Uncle Pete, please let people know about what you're up to and where they can find your work.
Yeah, I have a small YouTube channel called Your Friendly Neighborhood Uncle Pete, and I have my main thing on there. I have a series called Nails in the Coffin. So you watch movies and you see all the stupid decisions victims make. Well, I evaluate that using a scale of nails in the coffin. So when you see somebody do something stupid, like they run upstairs instead of seeking safety outside, or they don't double tap the victim, they do something stupid, I give them 1 nail in the coffin. The smarter a person is, the harder they fight to survive. They can get up to 4 nails in the coffin. And I'm already covered all the Saw films. My video for Saw 3D will be out this Friday. And every Friday you can get a new episode of nails in the coffin, and I'm doing something fun for October. I don't know why I'm doing it, but I decided to watch one movie every single day for the month of October, the same movie.
Oh, awesome.
And it was actually Josh's idea for me to watch The Houses October Built, since it is
sorry.
October. So yeah, so I've watched it 9 times this month, and every day I'm doing like a 1 minute, 1 minute video short on reviewing it, and I do little updates just to see what happens if you watch the same movie 31 times in a row. So.
Oh my Lord. Okay, that sounds interesting. So yes, check out Uncle Pete's channel, Your Friendly Neighborhood Uncle Pete on YouTube to find that stuff. I'm guessing that female detective in Spiral must have got 4 nails then, right? As she put up
not Spiral,
fight,
but
right?
I gave her 3.5.
Oh,
And in Spiral. I apologize. Yeah, I gave her 3.5 nails in the coffin because the way she covered her mouth, kicked the canisters away. I only give 4 nails, very rare. But yeah, I gave her 3.5 nails in the coffin.
Nice.
Great.
Nice.
Love that idea.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously, if you've made it this far, thank you so much. Please do, as I said, give this video a like, consider subscribing, bell icon, all that stuff. Follow us on social media, LSWOT cast, as in Let's See What's Out There podcast. Also, Home Media Minefield is where you're watching this now. I've got some videos covering some of the films that we've talked about on physical media. My latest one actually is an unboxing of the Arrow Video Psycho collection, which came out recently for the Halloween season. If you want to see the contents of that unboxed, please do check it out here. If you want to see some of my more creative work, I've got another YouTube channel which is British Isles. That's EYLES, as in my last name, and I've got a anthology series called The Urban Chiller Tales of short films that I wrote, produced, directed with no money. I'm in one of them as well, so please do check out that as well. As a couple of
you can see me in Josh's movie, The Last Amityville.
Oh, right.
To give me a small role in it, so you can see me in The Last Amityville as well.
I look forward to seeing that. Also, thank you for everybody's comments there. Just a couple to finish on. So Rob Dawn says, thank you all for a wonderful listen today. Made my work day fly by. I like to hear that. Nice. And Per Appleman said, thanks for nice listening. You guys, please come back with more later on. Have a nice day. And for everybody else that made comments or indeed watched this, we really appreciate it. So thank you. And that just leaves me to thank my panel, guys. Thank you for joining me as always.
Thank you very much for having me.
Enjoyed this. And we will see you next time on Let's See What's Out There. Bye for now.
Bye.
And I nearly used the wrong end titles there, but thank you for making it this far.